have a bit of fun, you know. It's just them, these continentals, you see, you know. Can I join?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at the mark, and as always, people are going to be coming in 5, 6, 10 minutes as we keep going. So we just might as well start. Heck, I don't mind, James, if you want to just kick things off. I mean, this was the one we were waiting for, isn't it? This is the one where we actually get into the whole business.
Yeah. To me, the exciting thing is the they self. The they and the they self is explained in sections 27 and 28, I think.
Yeah, right.
No, 26 and 27. Yeah. So anyway, the relationship of Dasein to as a they self.
Yeah.
But that may have been skipped. I don't know, but that's important to me. The professor, what's his name? I don't mean to be disrespectful.
Calarco.
Matt, yeah. So he talked about he did talk about Heidegger's sins, and I have a gestalt about that. I mean, I don't go for the exaggerated. Unless maybe there's some letters I haven't read. Now, in other words, if you were to dig deep and have and read like what transpired when Heidegger was being promoted to rector. He became a Nazi and then immediately was promoted to rector. He needed to do that, needed to join the Nazi party to obtain a high post. And so whether there was, I think I read the speech, actually. There's no Nazi in the speech. It's just pro-science, the speech he made on his, on commencement speech. So that wasn't, there's no references to the party or anything like that. So this idea that he was sort of like it was in his thinking that he was going to become something bigger in the Nazi party because of joining the Nazis, and the rector was just one more step along that path, the rectorship. But so I just think that's a little bit of a simplistic explanation, because he simply may have just been an average what do you call it? Ambitious academic. In other words, you get a promotion, you deserve a promotion, you take a promotion, kind of thing. And he didn't think much of the Nazis. He probably was sympathetic. He probably, like a lot of people, thought Adolf Hitler was really great because he was so evocative speaker and all that stuff. So he thought the politics were going along fine, just like we think the Constitution of the United States is really, really, really great, and it protects us and may even help protect the world, and like we get really excited about being American or whatever country we come from. The second thing was his attitude towards animals. He seems to think that Heidegger is putting down animals a lot, and saying that animals aren't conscious and stuff like that, or not sentient. And the only thing Heidegger says, I mean, I looked at all the references in Being in Time. I don't know the other works that well, but all the references in Being in Time to animals, he says nothing about animals. He just says, animals are like plants and animals. He doesn't really, he just basically, he doesn't say they're like plants. He says that the world and the plants and the animals and the life, that comes with it, is viewed phenomenologically like this for Dasein. So we have a kind of like a knowledge or understanding of things like animals, things like plants, things like, that's all he's saying. Stuff about us, not stuff about the animals. He says if anyone's going to do animals, it has to be someone else, not him. He does have a sentence about animals. He says if anyone's going to do something about animals, It's got to be someone else, not me. That's all he says. So that's all. I don't like all your professor's elaboration about how stupid animals are. You know, that's an invention, it seems.
Mm.
And you can do that research yourself. You can check Heidegger's work and find out what he said about animals. But in Being and Time, he says nothing. He just says they're part of the world, and somebody else should do that. Somebody else should research that because he considers animals important.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, yes. So, you know, but I'm just saying,
Yeah,
that
just-
was off, you know.
Yeah, just that. Yeah, well, from what I got from the lecture, that animals don't have meaningful projects in the same way that humans do. They don't.
He didn't say that. He never said that.
Okay. Well, he never.
Heidegger never said that.
You're saying he never said anything at all about animals.
He did. He did. Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different references to animals that amount to nothing. You know, animals are alive. Animals are part of the world. You know, stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I think he might oversimplify for the sake of, sorry, I think he might oversimplify that Matt, the professor, you know, to try and get the simple messages across. So he sort of discards the animals almost. But thanks for pointing that out, that it requires further inspection to see, in fact, that Heidegger has them playing a larger role.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, but isn't the distinction something like for human beings, their own being is an issue for them? So it's like, in some sense, we can question ourselves, or we can like look at ourselves in some sense. And this would be the marker that distinguishes something being human or human-like from other animals. And if the world takes off from like this self-reflexivity, this being able to take oneself up as an issue, then presumably if there's a distinction in animals, rather than having world, it'd be more like having an environment. So they're just kind of like caught up in the kind of sensuous gallery of the environment and their own bodies and things like that. So they can carry out their sensuous kind of like activities, but they're not able to like take stock of themselves. You can't really ask a question.
So in the tradition where I studied Heidegger, the fundamental difference between people and animals is animals can't make promises, and they don't have that linguistic framework of commitments, and that's part of where you take a stand on your own being.
Yeah, that's pretty material. You know, I like that. Something that's more phenomenological. You know, for a teacher to say that, for a professor to sort of make a phenomenologically based statement about the difference between humans and animals, that's okay. But once again, attributing it to Heidegger is another basic and related question. Also, Julian, based on what you were saying, I just feel like we don't know exactly the rhythm and the content of animal thoughts. I've seen pictures of Great Danes reading books and playing poker, but I know they don't do that. But the point is that it's so without being fanciful, we can just simply say we inhabit a universe with animals, and we don't know very much about them. Phenomenologically, I guess you could probably say that because speech is not made, speech types of actions are almost impossible, although dogs howl, dogs sing. You know, I don't know if anyone's owned a singing dog, but I had a singing dog. Maybe it's howling, you know, but still,
very
it's just the idea is that they do things that can measure it with speech. Just that it's obvious that a lot of species can't possibly have any kind of vocabulary because they only make about 3 or 4 kinds of sounds.
Well, it's not just a matter of not being able to speak. It's a matter of not being able to make commitments, promises for fulfillment in the future. And that's actually a really useful framework for exploring Dasein, is that authenticity is becoming aware of and owning the commitments that you are. It's like literally we are the commitments that we are in the world.
Warren, I don't want to have a big argument, but what is it that
and make commitments?
what is it that makes you think that animals don't make commitments?
My dog can't promise to quit chewing my shoes.
That's
Well,
the problem with some dogs.
You might say that your dog doesn't speak in your language, but there might be another language the dog is able to say that in, right? Just because we don't speak the same, we don't have the same mental faculties or abilities to process information, we do it in a different way. For example, one of the things that when you're talking about our language, if you look at humans pre-language, we have very diminished capacities, almost animal-like. So it's not that you're talking about humans, you're talking about the ability to have complex languages. So if animals can have complex languages, they would have very similar constructs as we do.
Yeah, bats, I guess, what is it, dolphins? Dolphins and some whales have complex languages. But the thing is yeah, like when a puppy stops wetting the floor because you actually bang him to do that, isn't that making the commitment not to wet the floor after training?
I think.
I mean, isn't it the same as humans? I happen to have kids, so I mean, I know when my kids were potty trained, it was a big effort. It was a big project. Same thing for puppies. You have a big project teaching the puppy where to use the toilet. So if that wasn't true, I mean, that being, how can you say that is not a case of keeping a commitment? It's not automatic when they reach a certain age that they're going to not mess up your rug.
That's tricky.
They have to be trained not to do that. Go ahead.
I think we got a lot of people who need to talk.
Right, I'd like to throw one thing in real quickly.
Go with Charlie, and then Shauna, and then Tom. Srini, you first.
Oh, I was just going to say that's a learned behavior. It's very tricky to call learned behaviors that are trained through repetition commitments. And there's learned behaviors you can teach developmentally delayed people. It doesn't mean that it's a commitment, and it's a tricky. You have to separate them. They're not the same thing.
How do you distinguish them? That's the question.
You're a psychologist, but there are ways to certainly distinguish them.
I think a way to distinguish it is using the word, using the idea of concepts, right? Things that don't exist, okay? A dog, there's languages and different levels of language. There's actually memory and future perception as well that exist apparently at different levels within different animals going down the line. But there is something else that's called a concept, something that doesn't exist. Call it a nation, call it money, call it an agreement, call it a contract. These are social animal behaviors that rely on things that don't exist. And with that is what enables humans to engage in projects, as Matt is speaking about Heidegger, and carry around world, because we're carrying around these projects and these concepts that exist in our brain, and we toolify the objective world in order to accomplish our degree, right? And a degree is nothing but an agreement that you've accomplished certain tasks or whatever. So it's the world of concept. And because we have self-awareness, that capacity, we are aware of ourselves out there in the project. We're aware of ourselves and our meanings and our context. We have concern, right? But too often we're being pushed, or not too often, but we are also being pushed by our culture, by our world, and moving forward, and not having that reflective capacity, not engaging the reflective capacity that that's the Denken, to step back and say, oh wow, that's what's going on. And where a dog, an elephant, a dolphin, they have a lot of the capacities we have, but they don't have that. And that's my take on it.
All right, I'm gonna go with Tom. Tom, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Muted, Tom, muted.
Okay, thank you. It's a fascinating discussion, and I'm curious about, again, referring to Heidegger. I mean, in the last 100 years, I mean, of course, whether it's social media technology, what we've learned about whales, dolphins, elephants, communication, and so on. What part of my struggle with Heidegger and the Nazi Party was that here I am in the United States of America, and we have children in cages, so I am complicit, and I'm starting to develop a kind of analogy, taking into consideration the technology, social media information, that I don't know what it was like in the 1930s and 1940s, being seduced by the Nazi Party. But look at what's going on in this country now, here, today, 2020. So I am conflicted. I feel complicit. Children in cages and all the other horrors that are going on in this country. Not to mention the trend toward authoritarianism and totalitarianism.
Welcome to the world of the mad ape.
I'm going to go.
I think your view of humanity is, well, a bit innocent.
Oh, okay.
We'll put a pin on that one.
But I wanted to get back to Heidegger. I mean, yeah, I have my innocent conflict, but what do you know what it was like in Heidegger's days? I mean, and the seduction of the Nazi Party. Yes, I mean, I hear what you're saying, innocent, but in the context of today, yeah, I have no power over children in cages. What? Heidegger didn't have social media.
Let's just take Heidegger and the Nazis. Remember, we always make the huge mistake, and huge it is, of looking at history in hindsight. You have to go back in time to, what is it, 1930, 1933, whenever it was, and think how the world looked then. World War II hadn't happened. The Holocaust hadn't happened. And you were born to a culture which had, big ideas about itself and really believed them. And it had come from a tradition that nice guys come last. This was the 19th century, the Napoleonic Wars and all that, This is about, you either, you stand up and fight for yourself, your culture, or the other guy's going to stomp on you. And that is still the world. Nothing's changed.
I'm going to try my best to get everybody. I want to see what James has to say in response to that.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that Heidegger, not Heidegger, I mean, what is it? Hitler and the Nazi Party, where they held about half the seats in 1933. Earlier, they had held 1/3, but then they nailed down about half the seats in the 33 election. And that's when Hitler was appointed chancellor, by the royalty that was left. And then what happened after that, was just the society was on a trajectory of improvement. People were very, very happy with the shall we call it the Trump economy, the blossoming German economy under the management of the Nazis. And there were books written, by Americans and so forth that saying, this is not a real economy. You cannot, they should not be getting this rich. They should not be doing that well, and so on and so forth. But Hitler was basically a crowd pleaser. He was just capable of getting people on his side and having large resources of people supporting him, and then running the state somewhat effectively at the same time. Now, it all went bad. That's history. So, we can look back in history and say, hey, everybody got disappointed at the Germans for supporting the Nazi Party, and the Nazi Party did terrible things. And now we see that as a big mistake. Any Germans supporting Adolf Hitler or the Nazis, that was basically improving their culture and making them rich during all those years up to 1941, I suppose, when the war became critical. So, that's I think Great Britain, when Great Britain declared war, that was when it really went critical. So that's all I'm saying, is that, it's easy to look back in history and say, well, 1933 to 1941, anyone who did anything, that was in favor of the party or Hitler, was a terrible person. Now Heidegger probably was personally.
The bigger threat were the Bolsheviks.
Yeah, I know.
They're the scary ones you got to worry about.
Right.
Hitler's just a nice little fella that's going to protect us from the Bolsheviks.
Thank you, Stephen. We all agree. Anyway, the point is that my point is that the people. Somebody like Heidegger was somewhat typical of what people were like. He was not a good guy. He was not an especially good guy. The guy who wrote this book was not that great a person. He had dislikes for people. He had I read a letter where he, was basically unloading on a student that he hated. A couple of students probably at different times, and he probably stole ideas from his friend Carl. What's his name? I forget. And he was ambitious, but just like a lot of academics are ambitious, they want to do well, they want to get good postings, they want to increase their salary and help their career out. So and get into publishing and all that stuff. So that's all. I'm just saying that he was not atypical. For a German, he was not atypical. For a middle-class German, he wasn't atypical. And for a ambitious academic, he was not atypical. Was he somebody you might not like if you met him personally? That's very possible. He was not. Maybe he wasn't that likable. I've never read accounts of how great a person Heidegger was. I've never read that.
All right, let's go with Shauna, your turn.
Sure. Just going back a little bit. I know when I first read Heidegger, I was questioning this concept of Dasein and where animals fit in there, and what made it distinct, that it was just something he identified with humans. And I know while we may not fully know animal thought content, especially from our centrist point of view, and certainly there is overlap with human traits with animals, or even identification of advanced cognition in animals. Where I was finally starting to parse it out was with this idea of, can we look at our culture from the edges of it? And so has that been manifested by animals at all, that they can get beyond their way of being and actually have this reflective process? And again, we're limited to knowing exactly if they could identify this or not, but that's where I made the distinction, is that stepping to the edges which is required of Dasein to be authentic.
I think that's spot on, actually. Yeah. I mean, if you ask me, I think, yeah, I would agree with Matt that animals have projects that they're into, and of course, it's not going to be analogous directly to human projects, but it doesn't mean they're not existing. I actually do have a pretty good animal ethics class. Maybe we can get to one of these days. Audrey, your turn.
Well, I apologize. I was 4 minutes late, like I said in the chat, and the question, it seemed like the initial question either had to do with animals or Heidegger joining the Nazis. I'm not sure which, but I have something to say about both.
Go right ahead.
I mean, I agree totally with Shauna, so I don't have to repeat what she said, because I also see that, where did she go? Did we lose Shauna?
She's over here.
But I mean, I personally now, we know more about animals and certain like different types of animals. And I definitely think what James was saying about his dog and learning things and maybe whoever was talking about having memory. And my dog used to sing to Led Zeppelin. You know, I mean, it was just like, it was the time, it was the right time that everybody loved Led Zeppelin, and my dog went right for it. That doesn't mean that my dog is going to look at the world at the edges. And so I think there is some difference there in terms of, I don't think we're exactly the same. I think we have a lot of interesting traits. In terms of the Nazi Party, I found it really interesting that, considering, based on the little that I've read, I'm probably only a third through Being in Time. If I'm a third, how many pages is it? If it's 900 pages, I'm less than a third. If it's 600 pages, I'm a third. Anyway.
It's more like 600, yeah,
okay,
or 500, yeah.
Oh, well then I'm a little past the third. But in terms of Matt and also your notes, David, it seems to me that he wanted to be, you know, he was one of those people that said, the good old days. You know, what happened to the good old days? Let's go back and start over here, because we're not seeing something. And that might have to do with the whole, after World War I, what was happening with the Germans and the agreements that was made on their behalf by the winners of the First World War. But he was looking for something new, and he tried it with the Nazi Party. I'm not condoning it in any way, because I think at some point he should have dropped out formally. I think he was reprimanded certainly by that. And I'm not sure if he was anti-Semitic or not. I haven't read enough of him to know what his writings were on that. But it seems to me that he was looking for something, he tried it, and he pretty much didn't follow it through. But he didn't follow it through enough to cancel it, to remove his name. But I definitely don't think that he followed it through, but he definitely wanted to keep his job. So he was one of those, what do they call them in the war? I mean, in the French, if you weren't part of the resistance, you were a collaborator. He was one of those collaborators. And so does that mean that I would dish everything that he said? No, not really, not now in my life. I think when I was 25, yeah, I would have not listened to him at all if I heard that he was a Nazi. But I'm finding him very, very interesting, and would like to really go further with the reading and the discussion beyond his take on that. Apparently, he had a nervous breakdown, actually, after the war, right? Isn't that true, or am I making that up?
No, I think I heard that too, yeah.
I read that someplace, actually. Maybe through Hannah.
Well, the only thing I read, the only thing I read about that was that Heidegger was forbidden from publishing. He was,
yes.
They interviewed him. Apparently they made him a class 2 out of 5. So
well,
he was not a
chair of something. He was a chair of something.
Sorry?
Or He lost his chair.
He wasn't allowed to teach at all.
Oh,
He was forbidden from teaching or publishing.
okay.
But 5 years later, they changed it. So that's all. It was just like a 5 year slap on the hand kind of thing, because he was a low level, his position in the party.
Right.
You didn't have a high position in the party or anything like that. So that was my complaint. I had two complaints. One was the referring to Heidegger as having opinions about animals that are not in the book. And then the second one is having basically his being a Nazi indicating that it was the next step in his career, that he wanted to go to really high places, and that was the whole purpose of his Nazi ideology and so forth, was becoming a very high up Nazi. And I see that as kind of like a projection. I don't think he was that ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that very interesting too. I mean, yeah, I thought it was mainly because he just wanted to keep his job during those times. But
yeah, he wanted to get a new job. That was the reason. He joined the party 3 weeks before taking the job.
Yeah, that makes, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. It's horrible. Right now, it's horrible. But
Yeah,
there's still stuff I want to read about him. I still watch Woody Allen movies, but I think he's a pedophile.
Well, that's a different discussion.
We need the
That one I actually
eggs.
know some stuff about.
Never mind.
That one I actually know some stuff about. I don't know much about Heidegger,
well,
but I do know that one.
Don't say
Are you
anything.
a friend of Mia Farrow's or something, or what?
Mia Farrow was
Or what's your name? Your daughter? Huh?
Please don't say anything about Mia Farrow. She tried.
Yeah. So do you know somebody in the family or what?
No. I said the Woody Allen a situation.
Oh.
I've read some. Well, I mean, I just know what I read. So, but anyway, maybe we could do a meeting on that someday. Maybe.
So I'm ready to go ahead with talking about Dasein and the they self.
All right, I think Sanjay had his hand up. Sanjay, do you have a quick comment? Sanjay.
Yeah, I mean, we had several discussions on several areas. So I just I had posted some things in the chat that people can look at if they want to, mainly about animals having certain cognitive abilities. There are many studies that show that. Also with Heidegger, I think that, I mean, basically I also found some things with I guess the professor's talk, the audio that you shared. I didn't necessarily agree with all of the points that was made in that. And I think Heidegger, while his philosophical constructs are pretty elaborate and well researched, he, as a person, he had some flaws, and I think that puts some doubt on some of his ideas. But I do want to go into Dasein. That's, I think, to me, the main topic that I think we're discussing today. So I don't know if you want me to wait for that later or go into that.
I think that's what James Cook is going to be bringing up. So okay. Yeah, go right ahead, James.
Yeah. I'm looking for. I'm gonna. When the book comes out about the angels with great ideas, I'm gonna buy it. That sounds great. Anyway, the chapter. What I liked about the this week's reading, the section 26 and 27. 26 is the Dasein with of others and everyday being with. So this is the they, and so Dasein is surrounded with kind of a presence of others, which is more than just other Daseins that we've been talking about. So the presence of others has a consciousness, but we can't know what the consciousness of the others that are circumspectively around us that are nearest. We can't look at the ones that are nearest and necessarily understand what they're thinking. But he does have a name for that. He calls them the they self. And the they self is kind of like a group consciousness of people that are likely to be in your sphere of relevance. So the world of relevance is open not just to things, but they're also open to other Daseins. And the mit Daseins that we talked about last week, he calls them, in this chapter, he calls them they selves. And the they self is actually a placeholder for what the other Daseins in the world are actually capable of in the ontology of being in the world. So there's an ontology of the they self and an ontology of the role of the they self in the being in the world. So I don't want to go too far with that. I want to leave room for what other people are thinking. But to me, this is very important because he talks about the constitution of the they selves.
You know the page you're looking at? Are you looking at something?
This is the Heidegger 119, 117 through 117 through 122, or section 26 and 27. But the book that is quoted in the reading is actually a different translation. I can get you the page numbers though, because I have it here. And like an idiot, I didn't use a.
It's Steinberg's translation. I have both.
Yeah, that I gave you the Steinberg. I'll give you the Steinberg.
I have it. I have both.
You have the Macquarie.
Yeah. So it's Steinberg page, ends on page 126 and starts on page 114. Steinberg.
You have the Macquarie Robertson translation?
And the Macquarie translation, we'd be talking about page skipping section 26, because I think that was more like last week. Yeah, page Macquarie, page 163.
Okay, 163. Oh yeah, there. Yeah.
All the way up to the next chapter, which is page 168. Anyway, that area, that area anyway. And he talks about some of the global attributes of the they self, which I think are really interesting. He says it's distance, it's this distantiality, being with one another, our sense of togetherness, being with other. He says being with another expresses itself as distantiality. And this has to do with everydayness. We actually have an everydayness of being with one another. Sometimes it's deficient. Other times it's more authentic, as in taking care of. He actually talks about two different, I guess in those chapters before, he talks about the sections before, he talks about the there being two modes of care. One is pushing yourself in front of another person in order to take their place and actually do something for them. In other words, be something for another person. That's, he calls that a deficient mode of care. And then there's an exceptional mode of care, which is an authentic mode of care, or authentic mode of taking care, which is jumping ahead of the other person and illuminating their path forward. That's the exceptional or authentic mode of taking care of. I'm just sort of like filling that in because I think it's important. Yeah, and oh yeah, so anyway, so he defines publicness. He defines a mode of being for the they self, and he calls it publicness. The they self is public. So when we're in public, we're under the auspices of the they self. We don't travel alone. We're under the auspices of the they self, and the they self has power over us. We don't, but specifically the they self has, specifically it consists of distantiality and subservience. So or he says distantiality, but I added in the subservience because he talks about that, that we're subservient to the they. Our natural state, once we discover that there's other Daseins in the world, is we begin to become subservient. So we begin to establish relationships for ourselves of subservience. I should almost stop talking now because there's so much content there already. The second one was averageness. The they self is constituted in calculating averageness and representing averageness in society, and actually stepping on people when they become exceptional. In other words, everything that you did was something that they already knew about. Everything that you accomplished was already accomplished by someone else. In other words, it's a flattening of pride, of ego, a flattening of individuality. And also, this is really important. The final thing is the leveling off of all possibilities. So what makes we talked about the projects, but it's really our ability to disclose possibilities that makes us powerful in the world. We actually go through the world capable of seeing possibilities and detecting possibilities, disclosing possibilities as they occur. So the they self actually wants to level it off. They actually want this group over here to take care of these possibilities. This group over here can handle those possibilities, and maybe this guy in the middle is more sort of the right kind of person to handle these possibilities, but not those. So there is a kind of like an editing process of the they self. So this section is really about the evil of the they self, if you will. Obviously, if you in society, you don't want to consider other people evil because you know they're all important. But the idea is that the they self as a whole has creates averageness in society, creates distance between Daseins, and creates leveling off of possibility.
So they're
I'll just be quiet now.
James.
So they're the they cells are interfering or with your projects, with the Daseins projects.
Yeah, they have declamation. They declaim they typically the they selves. Yeah, he really calls it a they self. In other words, it's a manner of being in the world. It's not the mit Dasein that we already met. The mit Dasein is a Dasein that is not me, right, or you. But the they self is actually a creature that he doesn't actually construct it ontologically. He just shows it to us. He just discloses it, and he discloses it as the as having these properties of distantiousity, as creating distantioity, creating. In other words, the they self is kind of like the racket or the system, and he says it's not the mess. In other words, we're not talking about everyone. We're really talking about our kind of like knowable world, our close-in world of Daseins, the ones that have an effect on our lives. The most telling, I think, quotation is what he says, something about identity. The they self assigns us our identity.
I did like the Freud's super ego.
Yeah, right. Very similar.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know whether he read that book or not. I forget the name, but yeah, that you're right. There's a relationship with that idea there, the superego. But he doesn't put it. Yeah, it's much less in Heidegger's telling. It's much less invidious. In other words, it kind of grows organically out of distantioity.
Right.
And feelings of subservience. We have subservience to others, and we feel a distantioity to other Daseins, and this leads to these attributes of the they self in our existence. And he says they self has an existence. It has an existential.
Right.
Yeah, James, go ahead.
So they do they kind of like, for the child, coming into the world, do they represent the parents, and then later on the society, the rest of the other, teachers and people, of significant other, significance in the society?
Yeah, this is everyone. The idea is that altogether they constitute the they.
Okay.
So the they is quite different from other, the Dasein mit Dasein. The they is the tendency for all the influential Daseins in the world to actually have a kind of a limiting effect on the creativity and possibilities of Daseins.
Okay, Stephen. Muted. Oh yeah, there.
Yeah, I was just saying this is a point which is coming up in politics, and to me, look, Nazis, fascists, Marxists, Genghis Khan, this is just all normal human history to me. I'm not biased against any of them particularly, but I'll probably point out that you've got to look at the perspective, say, somebody like Heidegger had at the time. He'd just come off this major war. Now, this guy, according to the lecturer, believed that Germany was the torchbearer of civilization. It certainly wasn't those awful Anglo-Saxons, Britons and their bastard offspring, the Americans, and all the savage hordes of Russians to the east. Germany is the torchbearer of civilization. And so I'll point out that the Bolsheviks showed up, started all the violence on the streets, were launching for a takeover. They had a doctrine that was near Neanderthal. And to a cultured person, the fascists came along. They were just bully boys that were protecting conservative society. So this is what people overlook. The fascists originally arose as reactionaries. They barely had a doctrine. They had to write their doctrine later. I mean, Hitler spent 3 years after he joined the party writing the doctrine. That's what I want to point out. Fascists are reactionaries. But the question I want to ask here is, Heidegger's opinion of the Germans as the modern torchbearer, the modern Greeks, so certainly a very, they had all the fairy tale kingdoms, very cultured. But Heidegger seems to think that, the German is the pinnacle of this mental artistic culture. I was wondering, I know all about the fairy tale kingdoms and all the wonderful palaces and all the artworks, these petty kings, and all the professors they hired and all that. And I understand all that. So somebody fill me in a bit more on the Germans as the greatest thing in the world as far as culture goes.
Yeah, I think Heidegger was looking, the literature and the art and the paintings and the music, and he was considering, his own culture, Germany, to be the pinnacle of Western culture. That's my
But
understanding.
at the same time, he was a kind of a back to the country guy. He was a back to the roots type of person. He was always wearing the costumes of his province, and and spending. He wrote the book in the Black Forest. He was a Black Forest guy. He was like what do you call these guys now? White supremacists? I don't know. They're just like they just like hide out in the woods, and they have cabins, and I think yeah. So that's he was not as cosmopolitan as the average intellectual. He was much more back to the earth. He believed in groundedness very strongly, and that's in the book. He starts with groundedness. We have to be grounded. Dasein is grounded, and so on and so forth.
I heard that Hitler had his troops read the American Western settlers of how they conquered the American continent and settled in America by by just doing away with the native Indians and just taking away the land, and that's how they learned to got the idea that they're going to take over Europe and the rest of the world.
I got an idea, and I'd like to ask a question and get clarification. And from this talk, that I took away the impression that Heidegger thought that the German culture, the German Dasein, were the group, and this is in reference to Stephen's question, were the group that had the capacity to be the shining light, the group that could step out back to Denken, look at the global culture at its edge, and step back in, bringing in a new world. Now, in Matt's talk, he was saying that in Being in Time, it was more of a tweak view than a global, big revolution. But and this is the question, correct me if you're, but I got the sense that he was viewing both the overall movement of the Socialist Party, right, prior to full Nazism, as having the potential power, and that the German culture had the intellectual and capacity to be, ahead of everyone else. What James Cook was referring to earlier about somebody being ahead of and showing the way. So in a completely beneficial way, benevolent way, that he said, well, we Germans, we've got the capacity. So let's lead the rest of the world in the right positive direction.
Right. The idea of care, right? Caring for the they.
Yeah.
I think Matt's point about him being a megalomaniac, he literally was probably the smartest guy in the room at the time. And he probably thought he could have some influence over where this movement was going, and found that he couldn't. It presents its own problems, and his hubris tripped him up.
Yeah, was kind of reminds you of the time we're living in, right? You know, who was responsible for getting our president, making him our president now, you know.
What?
Which president is that?
The one we have.
Oh, our glorious leader of the free world, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Hooray!
I think nationalism is like an optional ideology. You could be nationalist in a sense. Heidegger was nationalist because he wore Black Forest costumes, and he did join the Nazi Party, which is a nationalist party. But it's not in this book. There's no Nazi. This was 1926, right? So 25. He wrote it in 5. So there is a Nazi party, but nobody knew about it barely. You know, it was maybe it got in the papers. It was not something that was on everybody's mind. And even the nationalism was kind of an individualist thing. You know, like everybody wasn't, all the Germans weren't walking around like they were Adolf Hitler because they were pissed off about the end of the First World War. It was more like they were basically dealing with society a lot more than other countries were, except that conditions were poorer in Germany. They had a big falling in terms of deflation and deflation. So that was that's all. They had a hard time. That didn't make everybody a raving nationalist. So that's all. I just want to caution people about linking up Nazi ideology with this particular book. I don't see the connection. You have to use history and the names and the personages and watch their footsteps as the years go by, and then you can make the connections. But it's not in this book.
Right. Did he sort of quit the Nazi Party in 1935?
1945, yeah.
35.
I heard that he didn't last that long. That he was out in
right,
a matter of weeks.
He was in it till the end. He never removed himself. That's one of the big issues. But he stopped really participating after like a year and a half.
Right. By 1935, he was just not really participating in it.
He was like the people that, McCarthy got after. You join the
I'm a Democrat. Yeah.
What?
I'm a Democrat. Don't tell anyone.
Oh. Okay. You know what? I'm having a real hard time. I'm finding this conversation, I can't follow it in terms of where we are with the readings. Because when you're talking about they self, I have a PDF of the, I have a hard copy of Stombog, is that how you say her name? And a PDF of the McCarran. And the first time in my search, I see they self on 318, which actually is page 366 in the second section, point 3. I can't follow the text. So I don't know. And the text that you send us, the link, David, that you give us, that's from a different text. That's from existentialism. It's like from a.
It's from my personal textbook. Yeah, I mean, I don't.
It's not an actual.
To have this book
okay,
here.
Because that's the closest to Stombog's version of being in time. So I thought that it might be like a section of her book that they made separate. But I'm trying to find the they self that James was talking about, and it just seems like it's so far down the line in our reading. But
Well, he said, didn't you say 26, section 26 and 27, right, James?
Yeah, it's in 26.
Well,
because I definitely
you can find that on my PDF on being3.pdf.
I'm on Stomberg page 129, and you found it in the PDF. Okay, that's good.
I have McCarran and PDF and Stomberg on hard copy, so I wasn't looking at the hard copy. I'm finding that in
The PDF is the Macquarie, is from the Macquarie.
Macquarie. I have the PDF of Macquarie, and it's on page 366, according to my little iPad here, which is very cute. And it's looks like section 318, and it's the first time in my search that they self comes up, and the paragraph that I'm starting from is, how are we to conceive this unity? How can Dasein exist as a unity in the ways and possibilities of its being, which we have mentioned? And it goes on, and then it talks about the ontology of the ground, supporting the ground, and then it basically says, it has been shown that proximally and for the most part, Dasein is not itself, but is lost in the they self, which is an existential modification of the authentic self. The question of the ontological constitution of selfhood has remained unanswered.
Yeah, that's consistent with page, that's consistent with the section 27, which is on page 129. And I'll read that paragraph if you like.
Well, I would probably have two different, I have the McCarran. Is it McCarran? I can't.
No, it's not, the first mention is not on page 300 and something. It's on page 129.
Which section? 26?
26, yeah. I was just going to read the translation for everybody because it's fairly rich, the one paragraph. Huh?
The first paragraph of the section 26.
Not the first paragraph, no. The first paragraph mentioned the they. No. They are what they are. It says, the first paragraph is the ontology relevant result of the foregoing analysis of being with is the insight that the subject character of one's own Dasein, the others, is to be defined existentially. That is, in terms of certain ways to be. So he's flipping from an strictly ontological analysis, which we saw before, to more on the side of an existential analysis. Defined existentially, that is, in terms of certain ways to be, in what is taken care of in the surrounding world, others are encountered as what they are. They are what they do. So that first paragraph, which you just found in the Macquarie, I suppose?
Yeah, I got it up. I got my PDF version of it. It's a different.
You have the first paragraph of 26?
But this one is, yeah. This
I don't see 26.
The character of Dasein. The two means the sameness of being as circumspectively concernful being in the world. With and to are to be understood existentially.
That's mit Dasein. That's Dasein with.
Yeah.
That's an earlier portion. You understand that these page numbers are from a compendium of various authors. They are not being in time.
Okay.
This is not being in time. This is just excerpts from Being in Time, the Reader's Digest edition, as it were. I'd like to read this paragraph because it's very rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's from page 129 in the Stomberg. But you probably don't have it.
In Macquarie, what
hard copy. So 129. All right, I'm on page 129 in Stomberg. I have the book.
It starts off, the self of everyday Dasein is the they self. It's the first sentence.
Really?
Part of it. Yeah. Anyway, I'll read the whole paragraph because it's fairly rich. And it's very meaningful. The self of everyday Dasein is the they self, which we distinguish from the authentic self. That is the self which has explicitly grasped itself. That's the authentic self. As the they self, Dasein, now the Dasein is the they self. So in other words, Dasein has both. He has the authentic self, he has the they self. Dasein is dispersed, as the they self, Dasein is dispersed in the they and must first find itself. This dispersion characterizes the subject of this kind of being, which we know as heedful absorption in the world encountered as closest. I'm sorry I couldn't remember those words, but that was the way he described it. If Dasein is familiar with itself as the they self, this also means that the they prescribes the nearest interpretation of the world and of being in the world. This is not Dasein, it's the they. The they itself, for the sake of which Dasein is every day, articulates the referential context of significance. The world of Dasein frees the beings encountered for a totality of relevance. We've heard about that before in relation to beings at hand. The totality of relevance, which is familiar to the they, in the limits which are established with the averageness of the they. In other words, it's commensurate. It's commensurate with the status of the they. Initially, factical Dasein is in the with world, discovered in an average way. Initially, I am not in the sense of my own self, but I am in the others. I am the others in the mode of the they. In terms of the they, and as the they, I am initially given to myself. Initially, Dasein is the they, and for the most part, it remains so. If Dasein explicitly discovers the world and brings it near, if it discloses its authentic being to itself, this discovering of the world and disclosing of Dasein always comes about by clearing away coverings and obscurities, by breaking up the disguises with which Dasein cuts itself off from itself.
It's a serious
So
head.
the Dasein himself is the they.
Right.
And when he breaks, he has a necessity, there's a necessity to actually break through the they to authenticity.
So when he says average, I guess it means normal, right? What's considered normal?
Yeah, everything gets normalized or averaged. Well, the average is accurate, I think. In other words, the difference between the median, you know, like this, like oh yeah, they're out there,
Right.
they're sort of like the same, but everybody is well dressed and everybody is afraid of COVID-19 and so forth. That's sort of normal. But average is kind of like, well, what's the average person? The average person, you know, between the rich people and the poor people and the Democrats and the Republicans and the radicals and the, you know, radical this and radical that and the centrists and all of that kind of like reflected in averageness.
James, the average, the normal human condition is to become possessed by discourses. And that's what we're seeing. You join a tribe or tribes, and that's who you are. And truthfully, that's not very authentic. It's certainly not very conscious.
Right. It's like you're not supposed to have an opinion that might rock the boat, right?
Well, or you're supposed to have the opinion that your neighbors have,
Yeah,
or the people that you go to school with.
Exactly right, right.
So that averaging out and getting lost in that, would that be one of the ways kind of in which the authentic Dasein becomes closed off from itself and it becomes obscure? And what would other examples of obscurations be of things being of us being hidden from our authentic selves? Like, yeah.
Examples of what he says there, the disguises. So, yeah, disguise that we're not going to cause trouble, for example. So, I mean, I have to reflect back on my life, but I mean, you know, it's like a disguise you wear that you're not going to cause too much trouble, that you're interested in a job, that you, you're always holding up your end kind of thing. You're not as bad as people think, perhaps. That you're more normal than people suspect, possibly. All of those disguises, any of those kinds of obscurations and coverings on existence. In other words, I know that something happened to me, way back when, but I don't really remember the details, or the fear of something being disclosed, all the way up to the fear of something being disclosed about you that could wreck part of your existence, change your existence. It could change your existence. Like what if Me Too gets hold of me, the worst case or whatever.
Being defined by the they self is so pervasive. The harder part is coming up with an example of what's not that.
Authentic Dasein. The idea that you break through the transformation, in other words, stopping being what you were every day in a kind of like a way, every day, and the most part breaking through. That's, in my opinion, that's what it looks like.
Later on, he talks about idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity, right? Those are kind of like covers of that represent the they that confuses you with who you really are, right? They kind of take you away from your authentic self, don't they? Curiosity.
Yeah, they tend to make you feel. Yeah, I think they tend to make you feel powerless.
Right.
You feel like the discourse is going, because the discourse always goes on. It's constant. It goes on with you and without you.
Right.
So the fact that so much of the discourse seems to be going on without you, you go through life feeling somewhat powerless because of not knowing how to participate fully in the discourse.
Well, because also, and when he talks about language, he talks about language as a public kind of public process, right, of learning, from others, right? You learn language from other people, and so you become, become that language. And there he's talking about idle talk and maybe the ambiguities of language, so you could get lost in the they, in that kind of public language, right?
Yeah, but there is fun. There's some fun. I just noticed. I noticed from Stephen said something about Dasein through joy, and I haven't read the reference yet. But there is fun in Dasein. There is like fun in recognizing other Daseins. When you sort of break through to someone, that's always fun. And when you recognize another Dasein, that's a lot of fun. So there is a kind of like reward to having to going through the transformation and unaveraging yourself.
Sure, right.
Do we have to be miserable throughout our lives in pursuit of the truth?
Yeah, some people spend a lot of time trying to do something that sounds really worthwhile. And, in the end, they may have accomplished something. In the end, maybe not. But the one thing they may not have accomplished is this idea of getting rid of obscurities and, thoroughly trying to wipe out the obscurities and hiddenness and achieving something which is a new mode of being.
I was a bit interested in Wilhelm Reich. He was a thinker who went through, the German world in that period. He became a Marxist. So how would Wilhelm Reich, obviously nothing like Heidegger in terms of thought, but still a significant figure, who thought an extreme political group, in his case a Marxist, would be a good platform to launch his culture, what would people think of Wilhelm Reich? Because he's somebody I did read up a lot on.
Yeah, I think I read his book. I think he was, or one of his books. I think he was influenced by Heidegger. He was also influenced by Marx. No question about that. Yeah.
You know, when he talks about language, it kind of reminds me of Wittgenstein's theory about language. That it's a public domain where you participate in these language games with other people. You can't have a language without others, without they. You know, right? So it's always, when you're using language, it's always with other people. You know, even when you're by yourself, you're talking to yourself. You're also talking, pretending like you're talking to the other, the they. And so, you know, and the meaning of your language comes from these language games that you have with other people.
Well, the use. What Wittgenstein is talking about, the use.
Yeah, use, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Don't you think that's the case where
Oh, I think that they know each other. They knew each other.
Or you think they knew each other?
Yeah, that's what my daughter said. She studied both of them in college, so I didn't. So
they might have influenced each other, all right.
Well, I don't know if they influenced each other, but Wittgenstein got a lot of information from different.
Heidegger was not from Austria, but it's possible. The thing is, it's also not upper class. Wittgenstein was incredibly upper class, although he did teach public school, I think. I was going to say, in Wittgenstein speak, I think it is kind of like the game is being set up by the they. So the language game is in Heidegger speak is rigged. So the Wittgenstein sort of shows us how the use of language gets determined when the language is when the game is defined, and then Heidegger would be like, say something like the language is determined by the they.
Right.
So in other words, the average everydayness of Dasein doesn't determine the language. The language is already determined by the they for the subservience of Dasein.
Right. So Dasein has to figure out how to extricate himself from the they, right? By using the language.
Yeah, we have to construct our own language, essentially.
Right.
You know, like I was afraid when I read Being in Time for the first time, I was scared stiff I would never be able to talk to anyone again, especially about this. I would not be able to talk about these things. This would mean I would know a lot of stuff that I couldn't talk about. That philosophy was over my speech level. And, you know, and I was really concerned about that. So in other words, we have the society imposes the culture, if you will, the culture imposes these limits on us, which you have to rise to, you have to do extraordinary things personally in order to rise above those limitations that are imposed.
Just like what the structuralists are saying, right? As said about how we come into this world, right? Into a structure, and we become part of that structure. You know, language and all the culture, other, you know, behaviors, and we are, you know, we become they. And when do you become an individual, right?
Well, you become an individual. You become an individual when you're a child, you know, in a certain sense, but you're also under the control. You're just as much under the control of the they.
Exactly right. But when do you become an authentic Dasein, right? It's, you know, is something that you have to maybe go through a philosophical process to achieve it. Right?
Well, you have to look at it from the edges.
Yeah.
I'd say at best you pop out for brief moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the gap. And in those moments, that's when you can, it's like when he's talking about moods, when Matt was talking about moods and anxiety. I mean, it sort of knocks you out for a second of your regular, everyday, automaton kind of existence. And you're like, oh my God, and you see something and you could take advantage of it or not. And you can take advantage of it in some way. It's the in-betweens or the edge. I mean, depending on the language that you want to use to describe it. As a Buddhist, I say the gap, but on the edges works fine too. But you see a different way of seeing. It's like seeing, or seeing, or however Heidegger talks about it.
That explains why some people drop out momentarily.
Yeah, it does. And you do that even if you're walking. You can do that, you're taking a walk and, you're thinking of all these different things. And then all of a sudden there's like an unusual flower growing in your neighborhood. Like, where the hell did that come from? And it's a gap. It takes you out of the moment. And you can use that moment to say, aha, it's an aha moment. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's up to you at, how you can work with that.
Unless you're too busy to do that.
Well, then slow down.
You mentioned mood, and I was hoping we could spend a little time on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Because Heidegger, just in our notes, the excerpts, it basically is in section 29, paragraph 2, he starts talking about mood. Pardon me. And I have to confess, it confused me a little bit more reading it this time in terms of where the parameters of how mood is established. Because later on in section 31, he mentions understanding always has its mood. And I felt that mood was generated from ourselves. So Matt comments about anxiety can provide, is a mood that can help us get into that gap, as you called it, Audrey. I remember even Charlie was talking last week about the idea of, using philosophy not as an academic exercise, but having meaning there. And so, I interpreted his experience as that drive of interest or curiosity. And would that be considered a mood? Where are the parameters of mood? Where are the parameters of mood? Because when I was reading section 29 this time around, it almost seems like it's pre-established. Whereas I thought it was generated from self or from it came as part of an experience. So I'm not sure if people can speak more on that. I found 29, paragraph 2 in our excerpt, it starts in having a mood. Dasein is closed, mood-wise as an entity to it, and it goes on. And it kind of mucked up my understanding of it.
I want to throw out a quick word on, and then James, Audrey, or whoever can run with it. But on that idea of mood, there's the German word of Zeitgeist that I incorporate. Okay, Audrey says no. That I've always incorporated as that's not all of it, but as the they is defined by our projects on the outside, and we find ourselves on the outside. As we also are decided, of ourselves, whether we discover the authentic or not. We have moods as well that are our own, are emotional and all of that. But I also incorporate the idea, and I might be wrong here, of that zeitgeist, of the they having a mood, which is kind of the mood of the day, the mood of the culture, the mood of what's happening at this moment in time in this part of the earth.
I think that zeitgeist is definitely what's going on in your environment, in your little world, or boundaried world. And mood could be that. You're right. It could be that. I thought that he was talking about where that mood or your feeling at that time, your anxiety about the zeitgeist is what he was talking about. So I don't know if it's the same. I definitely see zeitgeist as the they, but I'm not sure if the mood is the same exact thing, because otherwise, why would you be anxious? I mean, unless you see, there's something that creates, I feel like I'm shouting, I don't know why. The angst that you feel at that moment is what brings you out of the zeitgeist for a second to look at the edges of that, because that at that particular time is your particular world. So I find that it's interesting though, because I don't know what he means, and that's my interpretation of it. Only, you know, in having a mood, Dasein is always disclosed mood-wise as that entity to which it has been delivered over in its being with the capital B. And in this way, it has been delivered over to that capital B being, which in existing, it has to be. What the hell
By the way,
thing?
that's one of the big defects of the Macquarie translation, is capitalizing being everywhere it appears. It's not, it's proper to translate being from German to English and for the capital B to a small
And does Stambach do that too? Let me see.
No, Stambach has all small b's.
Oh, she's all small?
All small, except for one or two. You know, there might be one or two that have capital letters because of where.
Okay. Well, all right.
Like
but then,
in the
so,
whatever.
Well, let's talk about what he means in that.
Okay, so I don't know the paragraph 2, which is what Shauna was talking about. He's talking about essentially you have positive moods and you have negative moods. And what happens is Dasein, the moods are actually like, that becomes saturated with mood. So in other words, it's like it shows up as an interruption in being, you know, like I'm extremely happy, you know, and I want to keep doing this, or I'm kind of afraid of what could happen. You know, I got to decide what I'm going to do. Let's do a full stop here and kind of like look at the situation more closely. Is this going to affect tomorrow? Is this going to affect what I'm doing tomorrow? So the moods can be like a shock, and they don't come from our intellectual power. They don't come because, you know, like we've been informed about things, or maybe they can come from being informed, but they could also be generated, you know, from occurrences. And so this kind of he talks about a balanced lack of a pallid, evenly balanced lack of mood, which is often persistent and which is not to be mistaken for a bad mood, is far from nothing at all, which it sounds like depression, doesn't it? So it's kind of like all these moods can actually ruin your day. So there's something that is not analysis. There's can't be understanding in itself. There could be understanding your mood. There could be understanding elation and giddiness and satisfaction, things like that. There could be, you could come to understandings about those things, but nevertheless, the moods exist as moods, nevertheless. And he also has another word for this, at least in the Macquarie, it's called state of being. I think it's a word in the Stambach.
Is he saying that we're never, we're never out of a mood? But he said we're always in some mood, and we can only, get rid of a mood by replacing it with another mood, right? Is that right?
Yeah, we can't actually replace our mammal nature with something else. That's the way I look at it. We've got this inheritance from other mammals, and as the mammal ourselves, we're going to be subject to these kinds of to this kind of existential of moodiness, and the moodiness is shows up in certain ways. And then he says, as Audrey was saying, in having a mood, Dasein is disclosed mood-wise as that entity to which it has been delivered over in its being. And in this way, it has been delivered over to the being which, in existing, it has. So in other words, if you're always happy, you're probably going to be a happy person. If you're you tend, to one mood or another, you're going to tend that way. If you tend to this evenness and averageness, you're going to be a little bit what it calls here the pallidness of personality. So
What do you mean by thrownness? Well, that's the next paragraph.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
why don't you point it out to us? Go ahead.
This characteristic, this is the next paragraph. This characteristic of Dasein's being, that it is veiled in its whence and whither. In other words, the sentence before that paragraph is the last sentence of the second paragraph is, the pure that it is shows itself, but the whence and the whither remain in darkness. Meaning, I'm thinking meaning the mood. Is that your understanding, James? In that last sentence?
Yeah, and it's also, he also calls it the thrownness, and this is a major concept.
Right.
He's introducing one of his major concepts, the thrownness, the fact that we have a existentiality in which we are essentially thrown from grounding, that we actually cannot completely change. It had to do with who our parents are, where they came from, what it was that we grew up as, and so on and so forth. So this thrownness, the existence of moods points to our thrownness.
Right, the facticity of its being delivered up. Yeah, okay.
Well, I might have incorrectly interpreted this, but what I understood it as is that sometimes we'll have a mood, but not necessarily know its source.
The darkness, yeah, the whence and the whither. Yeah, that makes sense. You don't know, it's in darkness.
Yeah. So that it can be reactionary, not necessarily coming from a point of conscious or analytic, the analytical mind. It's actually a reactionary.
No, not from these two paragraphs. That's what I was questioning, because when I don't know who it was who brought up the zeitgeist. I was responding to somebody about zeitgeist, but what I don't understand is where the gap is then, because he's talking about, Matt was talking about the angst or the anxiety, and at what point does that happen where there's that moment where there's the gap, that anxiety brings you out of something? I'm not seeing where that is yet in these particular two paragraphs. There's the potential for it to happen, but I don't see where he's, so I haven't reached it yet.
Since every Dasein has a self and a they self, the gap could be different for every Dasein. In other words, I might have a different gap than other people have. Yeah.
But is it always anxiety? So you're saying it's not anxiety necessarily?
Anxiety is the fastest route. So if you have anxiety and you're good at handling the anxiety, in other words, not erasing it, but rather
embracing,
existing in that state of being.
Yeah.
If you are capable of existing this has something to do with my training. I did Werner Erhard, and that was his interpretation, but it seemed to work very well for me. Although I started to read Being in Time before I came to that point where I was bridging the gap. But a very effective, from personal experience, I can say a very effective mode of existence is anxiety. And that's basically where Sartre took it up.
Yeah.
He saw that. Sartre saw this as a major road to breakthrough, anxiety as a major road to breakthrough. But like you say, Audrey, it may not be just that.
Right.
You might be able to find it somewhere else in your constellation of moods, somewhere else in your being. It seems like anxiety is a really good shortcut. It's a good shortcut for people with a lot of self-control that can sort of encounter anxiety, recognize it, and then be with it for an extended period of time. And then after, being with it, reflecting on it, you can actually move. You can actually move to a more authentic position in respect to it.
Is that
Well,
the
on
experience
page-
of a, okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Connie.
You sure? I don't mind waiting.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to follow up on your comment about anxiety. Is that experience of anxiety a result of the thrownness that he's talking about? And is that the thrownness?
Thrownness.
Thrown into
All the moods are examples of thrownness.
Yeah. In other words,
I think
is the anxiety and the mood, a derivative of that experience of being thrown into the world, this experience of groundlessness?
Well, if you go to page 238, the top of 238 in the first paragraph that it starts, a mood assails us. It says, a mood assails us. It comes neither from outside nor from inside, but arises out of being in the world as a way of such being. But with the, this is also from the text that, from David's link. A mood assails us. It comes neither from outside nor from inside, but arises out of being in the world as a way of such being. I don't know why people can't speak regular English. But with the negative distinction between state of mind and the reflective apprehending of something within, we have thus reached a positive insight into their character as disclosure. I must have read that 5 times. I'm not sure I understand it. David, you were in the class. What does it mean?
I'm trying to find where you're.
The top of 38 with the first paragraph, the first actual paragraph, not the.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. A mood assails us. Because it looks like we have thus reached a positive insight, which that's pretty, that's like saying something, a positive insight into their character as disclosure, into the mood's character. Yeah, up here.
Yeah. But it rises out of being in the
So
world.
it's a difficult sentence. The state of mind and the reflecting apprehending of someone. So he's talking about the negative distinction, giving us, helping us reach a positive insight into their character's disclosure. So what we thought was just a mood, right? Our normal sort of depression or anxiety or whatever, and our reflectively thinking about it, thinking about our internal mood, we realize that, holy smokes, mood is a disclosure.
Right. So the character as disclosure. So it's the mood, and the mood has already disclosed in every case being in the world as a whole, and makes it possible, first of all, to direct oneself towards something. So that's the gap that I think that I was talking about before. But I don't know if everybody experiences it. So they would just fall in with the zeitgeist.
Is this
I don't know if that mood has to be anxiety, like James was saying before. It's not necessarily that particular mood, but something does that makes us see something within. We're reacting to something, we see it it's coming from within, and it becomes a positive view of what we're looking at, and we go, and I can do something.
I think again, that's what you're describing, Audrey, is the way I'm trying to interpret that zeitgeist. It's a break between this aha moment of the mood that comes with the they, which is what I'm calling the zeitgeist, with the mood that exists as a part of the world out there, which is, the us that. That we are unconsciously, the unconscious us, right? But if something happens inside that makes us recognize that, again, the edge. All of a sudden we're out of it. Like Matt says, all of a sudden I recognize I'm playing soccer. It's like, whoa, something shocks me. Anxiety is a great emotional shock, but it doesn't necessarily need to be anxiety, just the discordant, that something's off, something's different. It's like, and that then offers that gap that you're reaching for, to say, there is a they, and then there, just recognize there's also a Dasein inside of me, and wow, what was that? All right, it could happen in a second, and then you come back to it 10 years later or not, but that's,
And then what he's saying, what Heidegger is saying, is that if you take that opportunity, I think this is what he's saying, that you take that opportunity, you see it, and then you look at it and you go, aha, that's the construction, that's the world. And then you decide, well, I'm going to go into that world again, but I'm going to keep my eyes open. I'm seeing what I'm doing. I'm seeing how I'm behaving. I'm seeing how they're reacting to me and I'm reacting to them, and I'm going to act accordingly. But you're not removing yourself from that zeitgeist. You're just you're looking at it in a different way.
Absolutely, I would agree. And that is then stepping back in with full awareness of the they participating, right? And even if you allow the they to push you along on a particular day, month, whatever, you're still working to retain awareness that that is happening, and you're aware of your individual potential of a separate way of acting. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And what's funny is that Heidegger calls this Western thought. It's hysterical.
Calls it what?
He calls it Western thought. I mean, he's trying to do this into, keep it into the Western framework, and I find it very funny. But anyway,
is it too soon to understand Heidegger's idea of thrownness? Is it with like Sartre's nausea or Camus' absurd? Is there a parallel there?
You can make as many links as you want, James.
No, is it later that the experience of nausea or
yeah, I don't. I've listened to people talk about Camus, and I read Nausea. I don't see them as what would you call them? Correlative terms.
No.
Nausea and thrownness.
Right.
But the nausea is kind of like more extended. If you're talking, I'm thinking there is the it's like it's a more extended interpretation. So I guess maybe it is correlative in that way.
Yeah. Is that with thrownness or
in the book Nausea? It's more colorful. You saw the movie or what?
Well, you're saying that they're comparing nausea to his idea of thrownness or fallenness.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not exact, but thrownness, nausea and thrownness. But they're you're right. There is a sort of a correlativeness, because nausea is more like a phenomenological projection on reality, and thrownness is whatever you got. In other words, you might not have that much. You might only have anxiety.
Right.
So I think that's the difference. Is in Nausea, he actually has a scene where he becomes connected to nature, and that connectedness to nature is the breakthrough for the character behind in the book Nausea.
Right.
I didn't read Being. Was it the other book? But what Heidegger's talking about here is basically all of these moods contributing to one's thrownness.
Right.
And later on, he says it's the awareness of the thrownness and the ability to utilize the thrownness and activate it in one's care that actually makes one powerful, how makes you a more authentic or powerful being in the world.
Now, how's
So
that
it's
compared?
one of the main contributors
Right, right.
to the breakthrough. So I think we're on the right track talking about that, because but for Sartre, it's much more a case of naturalism, that you develop a connection with nature, and that projects you into authenticity. And for Heidegger, it's thrownness, which is a realization that we have an inescapable connection with a self nature which we're not fully in control of, which presents itself to us in an everyday way, and is our inheritance. It's part of our inheritance. We can't count on fully breaking from that. It would be foolhardy to try to break from thrownness. Go ahead.
How's that?
Oh, sorry. I'm wondering if we can go back to mood for just a second, because I have to say last week Tristan mentioned something and it opened up a whole epiphany for me. So I'm curious to know what he's got to say now. And he wrote it in the chat. Maybe you can illuminate on or elucidate, whatever the word is. Tristan, I'm curious about, sorry, it's gone off. Do you want to just speak to it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just wanted to go back to when James highlighted the importance of mood being kind of conceived in a new way as disclosure. Was I hearing that right?
Yes.
So is this by interpreting mood this way, are we starting to see that this clearing that Dasein opens up for us, this clearing of understanding, that happens majorly in part because our mood actually colors and shades and contours that meaning in the world? And like, for example, like if you're pissed off and that's of course a polar example, he's even saying, it seems that he's saying that even in these kind of what seem to be neutral moods, there's actually a mood still going on that's giving you a step or some sort of access to the world. Just is there a link between the access to that clearing and mood and how it vivifies everything?
I think it's openness.
If that makes any sense.
You have to create the openness. That's my opinion. In other words, it's not automatic. It's not automatic that there's a disclosure. You have to be open to mood as a significance in itself, and create a clearing in which it becomes meaningful. So that would be my opinion.
Well, if we read the last part of that paragraph, having a mood is not related to the psychical in the first instance. Is it psychical? Did I pronounce that right? And it is not itself an inner condition which then reaches forth in an enigmatical way and puts its mark on things and persons. It is in this that the second essential character of states of mind show itself. And I think he has 3 states of mind, right? We have seen that the world Dasein with an existence are, and this word I don't know what it is, equiprimordially disclosed. I have no idea what that word is. And state of mind is a basic existential species of their disclosedness, because this disclosedness itself is essentially being in the world. So I don't know. So definitely what James is saying, it's not automatic. You have to do something. And it's not an automatic understanding of something. It's not like you've reached the climax and now you see the world as it really is. You have to be a participant, is the way I'm reading it. But then the next paragraph goes into the third, which is, I don't know if you want to go that far. So.
Well, and Audrey, I think, here I'm seeing mood as what we come into, but I can't help but feel mood is also what helps us interpret the world. Yet he basically states it's not something we put forth. So that would go contrary to what you were saying, Tristan, that it's how, it shapes our interpretation, which is what I thought mood was. And yet that particular statement about that we don't put it forward from ourselves seems to contradict that. So that's where I get confused. James?
Yeah, well, the only thing I was gonna say was that equiprimordially disclosed means, to me, it means that they occur at the same time. We're aware of the world and ourselves about the same time. So they become, and it's in the text too, that they actually, they're equiprimordially disclosed. We go back in time. If we trace back the beginnings of the world and the beginnings of Dasein, we see they originated more or less together because one and the other, they apparently can't exist without each other. That's what that means to me.
Oh.
I didn't quite get your question, Shauna. What was that?
It seemed to me that mood was expressed both as that we come into a mood, that the mood is pre-existing, it's sort of part of what we're thrown into, but that I can't help but feel mood is also how we interpret our world. But in the text, I'm hearing a contradiction to that idea, that that's not what he's saying, despite the fact that I keep coming back to it.
That could be yes or no, because it could be the moody among us. I don't think he says that it's how we interpret the world. But it could be the moody, the kind of like the moodiness could indicate an interpretation of the world that was based on moods. But all people aren't like that. There's also people that have moods that don't appear as moody. So there are people, or they might have like one mood and you can't tell because they have one mood. You can't tell that they're moody. In other words, they might be always happy, or they might be always thoughtful, or always considerate, or sweet.
But being thrown into the world is a common experience for most Dasein. Being thrown into the world, isn't that a common experience for the Dasein? And so there would be some common mood that would be experienced, right?
Commonality, yeah, because you could use the same words to describe other different people's moods.
Right.
But you could say that guy is happy, the other guy is happy and reflective, the other guy is undecided, No,
but
and they could all be brothers.
Right. Huh? But they wouldn't, nobody would be happy by experiencing being thrown into the world, right? It's not going to create a happy.
I don't know about that. Some people could be very happy about being thrown in the world. What about the rich? Right. What about the rich and they don't think that their school, the rich kid's school that they're going to is that bad? They might actually be happy. So I don't know. I don't know if thrownness causes unhappiness.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
thought
necessarily agree with that.
That experience would be like a not being able to control your the world that you're in. So this lack of control is is what I think the word, what he means by thrownness. That you finally realize you don't have a control in the world.
Sure, but that would indicate a need to level. In other words, people that were kind of like bummed about mood, and they're not. That's not everybody.
Sure.
That's what I said before. It's not everybody that's bummed about mood. So, or has so much mood that everybody can like spot them. There's that guy that's always smiling. There's that guy that's never satisfied. And so forth. So the fact that these people are all thrown doesn't necessarily distinguish them all as having problems every day of their lives. Some of them could actually have moods every day, but that would be okay with them. Like they're used to it.
Yeah, but if
they're not everyday way of being, why should they be concerned about their being thrown if it just means that it's their everyday way of being?
Right.
I want to add a
But then
personal
if they're happy,
experience.
is that consistent with their being authentic or being able to be authentic? Can they have a happy mood?
The mood is not the authenticity.
Right.
The mood is simply a precondition for finding, in this case, in the case of being in time, the mood becomes a precondition for disclosedness of Daseins being in the world.
It says the mood makes it possible. If you respond to your mood in a certain way, it makes it possible, first of all, to direct oneself towards something. Not every mood is going to do that to every person. And I don't see, Shauna, where you're seeing in that particular paragraph anyway, where he's saying that you can't interpret your world or zeitgeist from your mood. I mean, people just would do that psychologically.
When you were reading, there was a word about going forward, but I'll let Warren speak to it because I think I'm adding more confusion than clarity.
So I think interpretation is the wrong word. That comes way later. It's an active thing. It's really how we encounter the world. It's this background out of which we encounter the world, and our mood gives us a predisposition out of which we might observe things in one mood that we wouldn't observe in another. We may see possibilities in one mood that we wouldn't see in another.
I want to add something to piggyback off that, and maybe this is a personal experience, and it involves emotion and mood, and how I think it might relate to this disclosure, how mood is related with disclosure. I've taken these psychiatric medicines that have taken away my emotions, and I went long stints without emotion, to where it seemed like there was a flattening out of meaning almost. And as I've returned and weaned off of these medications, my brain started to give me more depth of access to emotion and mood. I've started to notice even basic mood is there as I go through my daily motion. But what's very interesting to me is if I'm not mistaking or misinterpreting my experience, I feel like the horizon of my understanding and as I'm involved in my contexts and there's all this significance, the significance is vivifying. It's vivifying, and it's not like I'm elated or I'm experiencing all these polarized, emotions, and that's making the world jump out more to me. There's just this buzz underneath and it's an interesting thing going from the contrast and having no emotion to getting it back. I'm actually starting to I see how mood is kicking me in to the swing of this meaningful context horizon, blah blah blah, the Dasein, blah blah blah. So I don't know. Maybe I don't want to use that as like my new gospel for how I think I understand mood, but it's at least where I'm at now.
As it's very awakening. I think that's very awakening, Tristan. Thank you. Thanks for that. It's like it's almost Sartrean. It's almost like the idea of the tree exposing all of its roots and possibilities of growth at the same time to him. It's like the vivacity of life.
I want to try to be as fair as I can be to everybody. A lot of hands up. Stephen, you've had your hands up for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up a point. I can recall when I first started to use language. For me, that was English language, and it's the only language I really know. The first word I understood was that. I'd point to things, wanted to know the name. Took me mother quite a while to work it out. But of course, then I progressed, as the months went by and possibly a year went by. And my impression, I began to feel a sense of disappointment that the language my parents was teaching me didn't give me all the possibilities of fine nuances of soul. I was looking for a language that would give me wings to fly. But I found in the end I was merely an earthbound misfit, if I go Pink Floyd. But that was the thing. I was looking for this very sensitive language. And it's obviously not really there in English. It might be in some, or possibly, you know, Heidegger's highbrow German. Of course, that was Heidegger's biggest disappointment with the Nazis would have been, after a while, he discovered that they were mostly morons. They were just people there feathering their own nest, you know, they were materialists. They weren't really, you know, on the great cultural project that he was conceiving of. But yeah, that was my feeling, that this English language doesn't really give us that fine mental language. Maybe there are other languages. Maybe it's a Greek, as Kenneth Smith was suggesting. That's my bit.
I just wanted to respond to that. I
go ahead.
think English is cool. I mean, it has a lot of languages have a coolness to them. The coolness to English is that it's a growing language. It's always been a growing language, and it's not as handy as German. It's not as deep and complex as Latin or Russian, for that matter. But it's a cool language because it grows, and you can make your own personal version of English grow, partly through your erudition, partly through who you talk to, you know, and partly because of the complexity of the ideas that you're trying to express to other people, and the time has come for you to talk about those ideas. So that's to me, that's how language grows. First, you need a good language. English is kind of like a not that bad language, but it doesn't have the verbs of French or Spanish. It doesn't have, you know, there's a lot of other languages that are good at certain things, but English has this vivacity to it, the constructival quality. So you can start where you are and become much, much better at expressing yourself in English. That's what I've discovered. And that's basically the history of English. The history of English is starting with one small language, which was Germanic, Old Germanic, and then adding on Danish, and then adding on Viking language, and adding on French, and just continually becoming more and more constructed and complex. So the language itself is a language to grow with. It's part of our experience as English speakers to be in a growing language.
I think Sanjay was next. If you have something.
Yes, so I was just, I just put a comment up that for me, I mean, what I'm trying to figure out with mood is that it's, I mean, I see mood as doing both shaping our perception of the world, as well as, you know, the things that we see, the things that we observe and how we exist in the world creates our immediate mood. So it has both effect. And I think somebody commented that it's recursive, and definitely it is recursive. I mean, that's where I think it becomes difficult to say if mood is something that is within us distinctly, or if it's shaped by the world. You know, the world shapes us and we shape the world. It's a dichotomy of both, I think.
Shauna?
Just 2 seconds, real quick, just on that last remark, the idea of water, cold and warm, and one area of water having a certain mood, and the whole body of water having a certain mood, and you know that one area helps contribute to the mood of the whole body, and that whole body also influences that, you know, certain area of water.
Maybe I could try my hand at like an example of mood. So if you've ever been out to like a bar with some friends and you're like drinking late and it's like they do last call and everybody orders like their final round and stuff like that, and they're sitting there drinking, and then it's time to close up shop and they turn up the music and turn on all the lights, and there's this massive mood change that the entire room undergoes, where it's like the lights are like harsh and like everything's like exposed again, and like you can really feel how drunk you are. Like the entire like smooth flow of the circumstance is interrupted, and it's like, where is the mood here? It's like the mood, it not only distributes over the entire world, over the entire situation, but the entire situation, the entire world is distributed over the mood as well. So they're like basically fused. Like we're never disclosing world without a mood, and we're never just having a mood without disclosing a world. So it's actually like a simultaneous fusion. Mood and world are like, they are like layered over each other. They're just like, it's like this film, and it's like you're just like caught directly in the film. It's like a single film or like a single projection or something like that.
I totally, that's great. That's great. And I mean, it's a beautiful image. I think you can do that in a group, and I think you can do that on your own too. I think that can happen also. So maybe that's how mood is. You know, it is something that happens. He says being in the world. You know, it's all hyphenated, being in the world. That's what this mood does. That's what this disclosure does. And then it's a matter of where you go with it. But I definitely see, Julian, that it's probably two things at once. It just doesn't have to be in a group necessarily. I think you could have been the only one in another type of situation, where you all of a sudden go into a place and you're the only one on a particular drug and you see something totally different, you know, or you're the only one not on the drug. But I think that both happens. Because that would be your world at that moment. That's your world. You're in it, and it's you being in the world. So it's a very existential type of.
So the mood is conditioned by, you know, your experience of the world, and also includes how you experience they, right? They, and also the self, right? Your experience is just, it's kind of a whole experience that the Dasein is, you know, is in that state, is a state of mood, and it's an experience of self and they, right? And
he sees it as being in.
Right.
So the mood is a component of the thematic existence of Dasein, being in, the part of the part of being in the world, the being in, the being entangled in the world is the mood. It's kind of like the residue of the being in partness of Dasein, without really encompassing the whole relationship with either things or the they. So it's a personal. It is a personal experience. It's the saturation of being. That's a cricket?
Jim, you've turned into a cricket.
I think that was it. Was that like a cricket insult? Was somebody saying, "Oh, crickets"?
Lucas,
got Lucas. Lucas has his hand up.
Yeah, I think Lucas has his hand. I was just about to go to him. Go ahead, Lucas.
I'm not sure how relevant what I'm about to say would be, but it's just like some general things that I think that I generally mention in the chat, but I'm just going to try to recap a couple things here about mood. Pardon me. I think that like when I think of mood, I think of like kind of moving around in the world, and like whatever situation I'm in, that's the mood. Whatever context I'm in, that's the mood. Whatever like they self I'm around, whatever equipment I'm around, whatever my facticity is, all of that stuff is kind of like a past orientation, and like well, oh, sorry, I'm getting tangled up there. Right. What I think I'm trying to say here is that like I gave the example of going to a restaurant, and like we all kind of just know what to do when we go into a restaurant or something like this. We know not to leap across the table and not to yell or something like this. So there's a kind of mood that's particular or appropriate for that environment. And that's just the way that the the world or the possibilities of the restaurant or are encountered or at play. And this means, or this suggests, if I'm understanding this correctly, that mood is something that's like ontologically prior to the way that the referential context of equipments or relevance is encountered. So that like whatever mood you're in, it's going to change whatever is relevant and whatever is useful to you. So like there was a comment about the connectedness of the world being encountered by way of mood. I think mood is prior to the way that the world hangs together as a connected equipmental whole. And depending on your mood, whatever is relevant, however the world hangs together, connected or not, is going to change. Next was something about like, right, just different synonyms that I carry with me when I think of mood. And those are like attunement, I already said, disposedness, disclosure, disposition, or disposedness I think is good, where it's like those terms carry the way in which we take our mood orientation from the past. Next was like the way in which like ontological or like temporal causality works, distinct from say present at hand or ontic scientific causality. When we were thinking of like ontological priority or conditions of possibility, I think that these kinds of terms are prior to ontic characterizations of terms like cause. So what I'm trying to identify there is trying to think about things like moods in a causal framework. So to say like, does the restaurant that I go into cause me to go into the mood of the restaurant? Or do I have a kind of referential context given from the they such that I apply what's appropriate to do in the restaurant? I think that it's impossible to answer those kinds of questions. When you attempt to answer those kinds of questions, you're probably doing something like hermeneutics, because then it's like, it's not a ontic scientific causal inspection into like what's caused what actually, but from your own interpretive perspective, what is it that's led you to be in the particular state that you're in such and such a time? A recovery in a sense of the past conditions that led you to be the way that you are from your interpretive stance in the present. So Heidegger uses the term always already. Kant uses the terms like conditions of possibility to distance this kind of ontologically primary or transcendental philosophy from other senses of causality. Yeah, I think that's basically all I had to say. Thanks for listening.
Jim?
I wanted to answer that, the question about the Camus' absurd. I found that when Heidegger was talking about the meaning, how understanding and interpretation leads to a meaningful, intelligent understanding of the world, and that the idea of the absurd actually is first mentioned here only once, when he talks about meaning. And I think that might have had an influence on Camus' idea of the absurd, because when he's talking about the experience of meaninglessness, right? That the world is, you can view the world as being non-intelligible, right? Then that feeling of meaninglessness is, I think, what he means by the absurd, and which probably, maybe had an influence on Camus' idea of the absurd, which might be almost the same use of it.
Shauna is next.
Oh, hi. So I'm drawn by that idea that Matt mentioned and Audrey mentioned, that idea that mood also provides that opportunity for taking us to the edge, for breaking the flow. And I'm still trying to see how that fits in. What I'm hearing is because mood has already been established prior, I wrote in the comments, prior to walking to the restaurant, rather than the restaurant necessarily affecting our mood, we're actually walking to the restaurant with a pre-understanding of mood that we're going to experience. That might be a stretch. And is it then when that has been, there's a disconnection with the thrown in experience, the world as it hangs together, that there's that anxiety or the mood becomes shifts. I'm still trying to piece that idea, like Audrey's kind of made that point and I agree with. She goes, how does mood provide that level of awareness? What are the conditions for that? And if that's the case, I also need to find it in the text where he actually speaks specifically to that mood provides that awareness component. I'm not sure if I'm making that entirely clear. Matt kept referencing anxiety, was one of those steps that breaks the flow, the mood.
Well, it makes a disclosure. In other words, it discloses things that are hidden. That's what mood does. So it's not so much that it doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't make you achieve a higher level of analytic. It just discloses more. That's all, I think.
Didn't he say
by the way, I wanted to point out that I am following Heidegger's example of inauthentic care by doing David's job for him. He's got his microphone turned off, and I'm announcing the next speaker instead of David. So that's inauthentic care, going in front of the other and performing something in his favor that will make his life easier, whatever you happen to be doing, David.
Well, that gave me anxiety, and it made me like there's this gap that I don't know what to do with.
So restaurants are a great example of designing mood, because if you're going to be a successful restaurateur, you're going to design a space that embodies a mood, and people will pay a lot of money beyond the value of the food to come be in that space. And in a broader sense, that's what architects do.
Jim?
Oh, no, I think, sorry, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, I've actually lost track of who's next.
Shauna's the next hand. No.
Sorry, I forgot to take myself off.
Audrey's due.
I just wanted to go back to what Lucas was saying again about the restaurant. I found it really interesting, and I was trying to decide if protocol and ethics, ethical behavior, has to do with moods. And I mean, we have protocol, we have, because of the they and the zeitgeist, you know how to act in a restaurant. I don't know if mood, or unless we're using mood in a different way. I mean, there's mood in terms of color and all that, but then there's mood that's more personal, which could be anxiety, could be happiness, could be, overkill in some ways, or anger. But I'm not quite sure if it's the cause or it's first before you go in the restaurant. I definitely think that you might have a mood going into a place where there's already a protocol of how to act, but something could shift there too. So I just found it really interesting, and I'd like Lucas to talk a little more about it at some point.
Could I respond quick right now, if that's all right?
Sure.
James is in charge.
I think my quick response, just to read off what I gave in chat, was yeah, mood seems to always condition or reveal whatever is relevant, as I tried to articulate earlier, and thereby reveal or disclose whatever is appropriate. So like what we mean by whatever is relevant seems to be whatever the appropriate course of action or whatever the appropriate course of interpretation is. If you're following the relevant course of interpretation or action within a mood, then you're doing whatever is appropriate. And in that sense, we can say that like Dasein is always doing what's appropriate, and it gets its sense for what's appropriate from like the world, from the they, from the its past orientation. Regarding whether like that has like moral overtones, but I think Heidegger goes to some length to like distance what he's doing from any kind of like moral dimensions or prescriptive dimensions. But I would say that like this seems to suggest that there's a normative or prescriptive dimension to what mood is. So that such that like we could say something like mood always like pulls you to do, calls you to do whatever is appropriate. And it's like there's a normative aspect of that where like one feels drawn to do what's appropriate at any given time. And there's a sense of like having to overcome a sense of resistance if you want to do something inappropriate on purpose, or sort of like embarrass yourself on purpose or something like this. One encounters a sense of resistance because there's like a normative force almost acting on oneself. We call that the they self, right? It constrains our own most possibilities. And also the moods that we find ourselves in and act out and interpret also seem to condone for other Dasein, provide for them as their they selves, their like context of relevance and appropriateness. So like that's not necessarily a moral relation, perhaps, but it's like a prescriptive and performative relation on some level. I made a comment earlier about how like psychologically we call humans primates who mimic. Phenomenologically, we could say that we have a they self and that we're always attuning and appropriate. That captures all the same stuff, arguably on a philosophically more fundamental level.
Could I just object slightly, Lucas? The they self could enforce an appropriateness. I'll go along with that, but the mood itself would tend to, by itself, would tend to influence our doing our everyday thing. So in other words, whatever our everydayness is in following our moods, that would be what would show up for us. Not something necessarily something novel, but what is expected or what we do in an everyday way. So that would be the result of the mood, for at least for inauthentic Dasein. The possibility is that authentic Dasein can create a separation, which some people call the gap between our everyday way of being, in being moody, and an authentic reaction to moodiness, which may or may not be in keeping with the they self. I think that's a good insight, that the they self is a normative force, but nevertheless, the moods tend to make us self-normative. That's my opinion.
So we live in a world of existing standard practices. Like this is how you go into a restaurant. Oh, we wait for the maitre d' to seat us, and you follow those kind of practices. And you might have a mood that you're being really rebellious and you want to break with those. And that in turn would probably change the mood of the restaurant. But the place I see this is if you want to do innovation, if you're in a mood of openness and you want to actually innovate, you have to confront the existing standard practices and understand that if you stand up and say, oh, well, let's do it differently. Well, there's that existing listening and mood that's probably conservative, and they're happy with the way they've been doing it all along.
Tristan, you've had your hand up for a while.
That's I left that on from earlier. Sorry. Someone else can go.
Warren?
Well, I just did.
Oh, that was you. Yeah, sorry. That's it. Lucas, Stephen.
So Lucas, do you want to respond to James? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
No, I don't mind. I appreciate it, actually. Should put more people on the spot. I'm not sure that I exactly follow the objection, but I think I might have identified a concern that I think, I hope anyway, splits the difference between our interpretations here. And it has to do with the kind of like ontological or ontic primacy of mood, and ontological and or ontic primacy of they self. And to employ, one of Heidegger's quips, we could say something like mood is ontologically farthest, whereas the they self is ontically closest. And in that sense, we could say that, like, yeah, the they self is an obvious, like, in some sense, obvious causal, big brackets there, constraint on a normative constraint on how it is that we're going to act in any given circumstance. But we always already ontologically have to be in some kind of mood. The mood is always already ontologically prior to encountering a they self, but both have normative constraints on how it is that one is going to interpret and act. I think that the kind of like causal interaction that we were trying to identify earlier might be better directed at this very interplay between what's primary ontically or ontologically here regarding mood and they self. And there's something like that already going on in the chat regarding hermeneutics and attempting to link together, like, in interpretation, what mood I'm in when I enter into another mood, right. What mood I'm in when I enter into another context, what mood I'm in, is it caused by my ontic exposure to a they self, or the way that I'm factically oriented ontologically already? Those kinds of questions, I think, are hermeneutic questions. Personally, I think that means that they're also idiosyncratic questions. That gap would probably be different Dasein to Dasein. Some Daseins presumably take their orientation more so from what they self are ontically up to. Some take their orientation from what their factical ontological moods that are prescient or available to them as individuals are. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that splits the difference.
I think the only thing that I'm missing personally is existential relationships. In other words, some things I think for Heidegger are just existential. They're neither primarily ontic, and I would say some of these things are certainly not ontological, at least not if you're not turning them into categories of being. So they're not really ontological if they never really become categories. So, and he sees moods as a range. So moods with moods being a range, that's kind of ontical. It's extremely primordial. So I just think that I don't know if you really realize, to me, it sounds like, and believe me, I'm just sort of, in a way, I wish I was you, because I wish I understood everything you're saying. It's kind of like the splitting hairs between the ontic and the ontological as easily as you do must be really, must be really fulfilling. It must, but I think some of these categories are actually just existential and primordial, and not necessarily either, primal, ontological, or, or ontical. So that's all I'm saying. Is that, yeah, you could say definitely moods are ontical, but they're a range. So it doesn't really do that much good to talk about the categories of mood because everybody has them. That's sort of my response.
Yeah, I was hoping to chime in because I guess I'm going to take it back to sort of more of the general idea. Matt planted the seed, and I've heard it before, with this idea that Heidegger said that mood is one of those, is whatever you want to define it as, is something that helps us break the flow, that provides an opportunity for that authentic experience. And so I'm trying to find it in the text or somewhere where that's really delineated, because a lot of people are writing in the chat and so forth. And I do get the idea, you know, the wonderful examples of the water and, you know, how it melts with the individual, like it's both something you're immersed in, but yet you have also your own expression of mood. I just need that sort of identified in his text where I know, Warren, you said you don't know if he actually speaks directly to it, but Matt, then why did Matt, the professor, does make reference to it as well, though. So where is this coming from, this idea that mood? Audrey, you're going to say something?
Well, I want to answer. I'm guess what I'm saying to you. I'm going to ask you, is that paragraph on 238 where he says a mood assails us? It comes neither from outside nor from inside, but arises out of just being in the world. So a mood comes upon us. It assails us, and from that assailing, something happens. Oh, where'd everybody go? Oh, and yeah, this up here, do people see me when, you know?
We can sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
It depends how it's set up.
I don't mean me as a person. I mean my cursor.
You're disclosed, Audrey.
I'm disclosed. A mood assails. Doesn't come from inside. It doesn't come from outside. I'm not sure I agree with him on that. But it arises from being in the world, which totally makes sense. Whether it comes from inside or outside, or it just comes from being in the world, it's one or the other. But with that negative distinction between state of mind and a reflective apprehending of something within, we have thus reached a positive, this is the potential. This isn't necessarily always going to happen. But with the negative distinction between state of mind and the reflective apprehending of something within, we have thus reached positive insight into their character as disclosure. The mood has already disclosed in every case being in the world as a whole, and makes it possible. That's where the potentiality comes from. It makes it possible, first of all, to direct oneself towards something, or it doesn't have to do that. But the fact is that the mood is there, and that's the potential. And you can call it a gap, or you can call it whatever you want to call it. But that's where your authentic self can well, I don't know, act, you know, or look at something, or do the see that Heidegger talks about, and actually see something. So what I'm asking you is, what about that don't you see where he's directly talking about that in the text?
Because that's one of the parts where he's really talking about how we come into it. I agree with the statement that it's the disconnect, like Warren, you even mentioned, if you felt like being a rebel walking into the restaurant. So your mood is not in alignment with the particular mood you're walking into. So we've all made references to this because it makes sense, quite frankly, that there would be sort of this disconnect, or, you know, a difference between the mood that we're coming into, or has it, or even the mood that exists around a particular experience. I agree that would make sense, then that would be a break in the flow. But I'm just not seeing in the text where he talks specifically about us owning our own mood, or recognizing that distinction. I've been looking.
What does disclose mean?
I think I think that's where what he's saying there. Essentially, he's saying that we have a state of mind, and we always have a state of mind. We don't know if it's especially coming from inside or outside. Outside would be the restaurant. Inside would be, our kind of just our thrownness. But it's occurring. We have a state of right along. We have a right along state of mind, and the state of mind conditions our being in the world, and understanding for the first time that it conditions our being in the world is actually is the breakthrough here. He's talking about the fact that it constitutes a greater recognition of the fullness of being.
That, I agree, James. And in fact, just to restate in a slightly different way what you were saying, and what I picked up from what Audrey was just reading out, that in fact, it's the aha moment of, oh, there is a they, which is different from me. So the fact that the gap can come from the recognition of being an unconscious Dasein, being pulled along by the they without knowing that there is a they, to that break that says, oh, hold it. There's a mood coming from out there that is in fact potentially different from me, and seeing the existence of something that you weren't aware of before, that was always there, but you just never recognized it.
Thanks. I think I had a limited interpretation of the word disclosedness, and so I wasn't seeing the connection. Thank you.
Well, if I could, I see hands up, so should I not talk? I mean, people have hands up. Lucas.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Audrey. I want to try to be fair to everyone.
Well, then let them talk. I can shut
all right, Stephen.
Okay.
Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to wonder. I'm a bit curious about the whole idea of the little revolutions in education. You had your Waldorf education, your Rudolf Steiner, or Montessori, and all that. Now, this is a thing that the mechanistic education would always tend to push itself back, because that's the lowest common denominator. You can just fall into that habit. And that's a feeling I get it's come back so strongly, that institutionalization of the person. I just regard it as risky now, because I'm starting to see a very dangerous world growing, because people are not thinking. Thinking, again, it's a little bit hard. It's something you have to, rise a bit to the occasion, And, a lot of the hostility that we're seeing now is places like America. It's a fairly sophisticated place, but, a lot of kids went through education and, I'm coming here to, score some points so I can go and get a job. And they wander out of the educational institution. They suddenly notice there's not the jobs there anymore. Hey, dude, I went through education, student debt. Where's the turnstile that puts me in a nice little government job where I can sit in a cubicle and drink lattes all day? And I'm just seeing that, education as a sausage machine, education as the institution. And I'd like some inputs on that question. Did Heidegger have any input there?
From a mood?
Well, I think he generally had very dim views of what we've done with the culture in general, not just education, but all of our institutions. He would have said that they're growing into degeneracy, and I think he would agree with a lot of that.
He was responsible for part of education, which we already discussed. So the idea that he would sort of like turn tail and assault education in itself would be unlikely, I think. Matter of fact, he was deeply immersed in the intellectual elite. His partner in crime at the time he wrote the book was none other than Edmund Husserl. So, you know, they ran the journal together in which Being and Time was originally published. So on occasion had hung out together. They were very close as mentor and student. So
he couldn't see the Nazis coming.
At that time,
Stephen,
nobody could see the Nazis because they were just stupid guys, you know, getting arrested for demonstrating. You know, it'd be like saying the guys downtown Portland were the future leaders of our country. Yes, a lot of people are afraid of that, but you know that's the same image.
I think Stephen, from Matt's lecture, he suggested, at least what I took from that is that he saw education, the capacity for education to facilitate exactly what you're speaking of. But he wanted to step and use that tool to direct everyone in the right way, right? So he wanted to use it in a benevolent way, but he saw it as a, you know, you're not going to raise everyone up to the level of a thinking Dasein, but we have an education system that people are already attuned to following along with. So let me use that system to get everyone to the good, right, proper place for their own benefit.
My problem with him not seeing the Nazis coming is not the evil. I don't have a problem with the evil. My problem was that he believed they would respect his fine culture. He didn't see the moron in them. Did he appreciate that, well, in the end, any political party is really a gang of morons? It's not the stuff of philosophy.
Even it's easier to see from our perspective than probably where he was. I mean, we've seen numerous political movements that have degenerated into chaos and calamity. So it seems more obvious to us now.
But he did have the benefit of hindsight when he's talking about politics, because politics has been around for a long time. So, you know, to expect that a political movement could become foundational for the cultural change he wanted is the tricky part. I mean, have there been cases in history of that before where a purely popular political movement has become the basis for a cultural change? And at the moment, I just can't think of anything.
Well, everything out of the past. I mean, there isn't. Well, this is the First World War, and the, you know, what's happened after the First World War. You're a nationalist. Your country is humiliated. He's an agrarian, and he has a whole different view of his. I mean, a nationalist already has boundaries of where they're going with their, you know, their state of mind, if you will, and you know, I don't see why. I mean, he wrote this book. When did he write this book, James?
1925.
1925
was published in 27.
Okay, so I mean, in hindsight, we're talking 5 years after this or 6 years after this horrible situation for him personally, you know, because he's this nationalist. I don't think he's thinking that he can take someplace, you can go someplace else if you understand being. And I think he had a lot of insight into that, but where he was going with it, it's just, you know, I mean, I wouldn't expect him to go, you know, beyond, you know, education to talk about Rudolf Steiner and, Marie Montessori, they had very different views, all of them. And education, the education we have really is based on the Prussian army. In America. And, where people would just, hordes of people would listen to whoever's talking, and you're not supposed to even say much. So it's
You're
I don't
shackled.
think Heidegger should have anything to say other than in this
It's
book.
a shackling process. It's a shackling process, I think, the education system. It's there to turn people into, I used to use the term sausage machine.
Well, it
turn people
is a
into
sausage machine.
nice little sausages.
But I don't expect Heidegger to be the one that's going to get us out of that. He's talking about looking at the world in a totally different way. And then you could take that knowledge or that insight or, trying to look from the edge and then seeing for yourself and your zeitgeist what to do with it. So you might say, oh, I'm going to work with education, or we can't make Heidegger be in charge of it all. It's not his point of view that's supposed to change the world.
And then there's a Democrat. The Democrats at the moment are saying burn it all down.
Well,
okay. Anyway,
do that too, and you could just defund it.
I think I want to talk about Heidegger. He's talking about he does talk about the they having a lock on culture, the determination of culture. But he doesn't say that there's a political solution to that. I haven't read the Black books, so I need to do that to be more educated in this way. But he doesn't in this book, and here he doesn't talk about the intervention of Dasein into the outer world in order to save the they from destroying destroying the world or anything like that, or or destroying culture, or destroying German culture for that matter. He says none of that. What he does talk about in later books, he talks about technology, and that was a posting on one of the sites, David. Somebody posted a long video of a modern philosopher discussing Heidegger's approach to technology. And it was very interesting. But it's not the same as the content of Being in Time. It was a little bit misleading because most of the video was about a very good lecture on Heidegger and post-Heideggerian views of technology, and technology as a destructive and constructive force.
It was Herbert Dreyfus from Berkeley.
No, the video wasn't Herbert Dreyfus. No? It was a young guy. No, it was a young guy.
Well,
Herbert Dreyfus is quite old.
At the time.
Huh?
He was young at the time.
This was a color. This is a modern video, and it was even a video from this guy called New Ideas Aloud, which was kind of a woo-woo video site.
Okay, no, the video I'm thinking of was black and white. It was Heidegger.
I know who Herbert Dreyfus is. He's the foremost American expert on Heidegger. Yeah.
And he was interviewing Heidegger. It was from like back in the 50s.
Sure. Anyway, it was a very interesting video. And it pointed to things that could go very wrong because of technology. And somebody has been posting about this already, Julian, yeah. It was an interesting video, and the woo-woo-ness was coming in and out because the interviewer was a woo-woo guy. So that was kind of cool. And the Heideggerian fellow who was being interviewed, he had to answer back questions about woo-woo in a positive manner, so that the continuity would not be lost. So it's very interesting from that standpoint too. And then, David Bohm, like agreeing with everything that David Bohm said and stuff like that. So later Heidegger did have a view about the destructive aspects of technology in society. But what I've read so far, and what anything you could possibly read in Being and Time, except from possibly a slightly conservative cast to parts of the book, or this, but most of the book is not conservative at all because it's all about the future. So in Heidegger, we have a kind of a futurist and somebody that's not by nature conservative, even though he believes in groundedness and certain inescapable or inevitable components of being in the world that cannot be avoidable components of being in the world, such as fallenness and thrownness, which we're talking about tonight.
I think next time we should talk about section 32 on understanding and interpretation, and section 38, falling and thrownness. I think these are interesting and might go with the conversation that we've been having. But it is almost 10 o'clock, in case anybody's interested in going to sleep. That is being part of the world.
Yeah, I'll put it up. Which section?
Well, it's part of what you gave us already, so we don't have to download anything else. It's paragraph 32, section 32, understanding and interpretation, as understanding Dasein projects its being upon possibilities, and it's those possibilities that I find really interesting. And then on page 242, section 38, falling and thrownness, since we already became familiar with thrownness. That's okay. Yeah, see? And that one. Since we've already talked about thrownness, I thought that might be interesting to focus on next time.
So he talks about the four concept and the foreseeing, I think.
Where's that?
Well, he talks about the four concept.
I don't know what section. I'm just you talking about the.
It's in section 32.
Oh, okay.
Hang on, I got lost.
Understanding and interpretation.
Yeah. This is where he talks about the foreseeing, forehaving, and so there's a long paragraph here. I'll read it. It's in the Macquarie on that the ready to hand is always understood in terms of a totality of involvements. The totality need not be grasped explicitly by a thematic interpretation. Even if it has undergone such an integration, it reaches into an understanding which does not stand out from the background. And this is the very mode in which it is the essential foundation for everyday circumspective interpretation. And he has a special, this is a very important qualification in Heidegger. Interpretation is how it's based on our view, our point of view, not necessarily on a full understanding, fully developed understanding of things, but rather an interpretation of what Kant would have called an interpretation of phenomena or a noumena. In each case, this interpretation is grounded in something we have in advance, in a forehaving. As the appropriation of understanding, so forehaving sort of like points to the future, but it says something we're going to own. In the appropriation of understanding, the interpretation operates in being towards a totality of involvements which is already understood, a being which understands. When something is understood but is still veiled, it becomes unveiled by an act of appropriation. And this is always done under the guidance of a point of view, which fixes that with regard to which what is understood is to be interpreted. So so he's saying here that there's an appropriation of the something through the point of view. In every case, interpretation is grounded in something. So there's that's the yin yang, the interpretation and the point of view. In every case, interpretation is grounded in something on we see in advance, in a foresight. This foresight takes the first cut out of what has been taken into our forehaving, and it does so with a view to a definite way in which this can be interpreted. So the foresight is the first cut into forehaving. Anything understood which is held in our forehaving and towards which we set our sights foresightedly becomes conceptualizable through the interpretation. In such an interpretation, the way in which the entity we are interpreting is to be conceived can be drawn from the entity itself. Or the interpretation can force the entity into concepts to which it is opposed in its manner of being. So we can go both ways. In either case, the interpretation has already decided for a definitive way or a definite way of conceiving it, either with finality or with reservations. It is grounded in something we grasp in advance, in a foreconception. So this is all like this is all the future talk, all coming up in one big paragraph. We have a foreconception of things, which is based on our interpretation and our interpretation which is based in interpretation and in our point of view, and then it comes up rightly or wrongly through foresight and foreunderstanding of the something. So this is, in a way, he's saying this is true in every way. This is the way Dasein encounters truth, or at least evidence, or facticity. So the way Dasein is encountering facticity is by staying ahead of it, either rightly or wrongly. That's my interpretation. Yeah.
And that's great. I mean, what I was saying earlier was, let's do that next time. I can't find where you are. I'm reading section 32.
It's the first, second, third, fourth, no, third. It's the fourth paragraph in that section. After you finish up with, but we never perceive equipment that is ready to hand, the paragraph after that, the ready hand is always understood in terms of the totality of a totality of involvements. So the totality of involvements leads us to a foreconception of And that's in a sense, I see this as Heidegger's interpretation of phenomenology. His interpretation of Dasein's phenomenological understanding of disclosiveness is for conception.
No, I'm just wondering if Sives was a beautiful Freudian slip there. You know, it's so symbolic. You know, you had death wielding the sigh in various movies. You know, and Nietzsche, and you know, it's how to philosophize with a hammer. So you can enlighten us on how to philosophize with the Sives.
I'm not that great. No, don't put me in those categories at all. Not the Grim Reaper. I am. Even though I love and respect Nietzsche, I am not Nietzsche. I'm not close to Heidegger. I'm just a cat reading Heidegger, so and loving it. Yeah, and that's mood. You know, that's just my average everydayness incorporated into ontical view of ontology. That's not in existence, of course. So
Heidegger's point, though, is a bit about waking up, isn't it? It's about ceasing to be such a sleepwalker. You know, learning to notice the subtleties that are going on around you. You know, the world is ignoring. You know.
It's existence, stupid.
Well, that can be the line for your political campaign, couldn't it? You know, it's existence, stupid.
You know, sometimes we get away with shit like that, and other times we just don't. We can't make it work. It's our thrownness. And the only way we know it's our thrownness, you know, and not to do it is because of our fallenness, is because we fell on our face in the past.
But the world we have now is a giant which has grown up around us. And so us, the poor dwarfs, have been crushed by the world now. The individual is now just a midget surrounded by the gargantuan creations of the modern world.
Yeah, the Leviathan, the Hume's not Hume. Hobbes wrote the Leviathan. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the world is a Leviathan. That was the, I guess, was that the 17th century? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting a bit Hare Krishna. The other one had the illustration of all the people walking into the mouth of Shiva or Krishna or whatever it is, and that's it's Hegel as well, is his lovely little trip through history, you know, the great grinding ball of history. And the poor existentialists raised their finger and said, hey, Hegel, I'm the dude that's getting crushed by the steamroller of history. That's where I feel, you know, that was the point the existentialists were trying to raise. It's real, man. You know, you're talking about the steamroller of history rolling along. We're getting crushed. We're real. We have feelings.
Well, with that,
there is a reference.
I'm very tired and I'm going to bed. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Maybe we can take that up next time, section 32 or something.
Right. And thanks for bringing up so many great distinctions tonight.
Great. Bye-bye.
And answering questions. Right. Heidegger at one point, he calls this, he says Dasein is ens realissimus. I tried to translate that, by the way, through Google Translate. It wouldn't translate, but ens is being. So the being of reality. So Heidegger does point to an alternative. We don't have to consider ourselves in the Leviathan. We can classify ourselves as ens realissimus. I don't know if it's a word, but because Google Translate doesn't know it, but it is it's kind of the most real type of being, if you will. So if we can achieve the most real type of being, then maybe that is as important as the fact that we are part of a they self, and at the same time, the they self is something that's completely out of proportion to most individuals. There's only a select class of individuals that apply direct pressure on the they self. You take it on the mass, rather. And the Leviathan is the mass. So there's only a very distinct class of individuals that apply pressure on the mass. The rest of us remain circumspective through most of our lives. And also we have to deal with the everyday. But do you have some ideas about that, David? I haven't heard much from you tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I usually will say something if I'm sure about what I'm saying, but and very little about any of this I'm sure about. So
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot
very
of
hard for me
ideas have been brought up
about any of this. Wait, what?
Sure. A lot of good ideas have been brought up. You know, people have really interesting points. I like the thing about the bar. That was Julian, I guess. The waking up at the end of the night, and the bad people that run the bar turn the lights on very bright in order to get the bar empty faster while people are drinking the beginning of their last drink.
Yeah.
So, and realizing how drunk they are, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, impoliteness, in other words. So, you know, that is definitely a mood enhancer when you encounter that stage of reality and oppression. It's a real mood enhancer.
You use what works. Use the tools you got.
I had a funny one yesterday. I went into a shop to buy a cacciatore sausage to put in my soup that I was making. So I roll in, and the girl will inevitably say, you know, I say, I want a cacciatore, and she'll say only one. And I've always think, you know, A means only one. But on this occasion, there was only one in the tray. And I sort of point down to it and giggle a bit and say, well, there's only one anyway. And, you know, she turns around, wraps it up. She's fuming then. She slams the cacciatore down on the counter and just glares at me like that. And I figure, what are they doing, the kids in school these days, you know? It's like Jesus will say, turn the other cacciatore, give the person the benefit of the doubt, you know? But it's not happening anymore. It's everybody's out for blood, I think, now. We're in a dangerous world.
Well, there's also the idea that everything is a meme. So if you do anything that is not suitable or not appropriate, as Lucas was saying, I think or maybe it was somebody else, but if you do something that's inappropriate, it becomes a meme. So it gets memified by your audience. So if it happens to be the lady that you were speaking to, which often it might be, the cacciatories could get squished in the process. It's a horrible idea. I feel sorry for you having to have witnessed that.
Oh, yeah, obviously she got very incensed. There was something a bit raw there. Maybe the company or the supermarket, gave their inexperienced workers a hard time. And so the mere suggestion that she was out of whack with what was going on, that her powers, her ability was questioned, rather than just think, oh, well, maybe the guy wasn't really intending an insult. Maybe he was just stating something obvious. So this is what you get. You're getting this with a young person, It's how often do you walk into a shop, and what I'm noticing now, that these young staff, they're getting a bit aggro. There's a being of the world, isn't there? And how's a being of the world hanging these days? You know, that's going to be the question. Because I've been hanging with philosophy for years, sitting there like a good little pretzel, taking in all the magnificence of Western civilization. I thought, well, you're just doing this as a hobby. It doesn't really matter. And in a few years, I suddenly woke up. It matters now. How people think. It matters. It's not a joke.
I'm thinking I've got to stop. I think I've got to stop going to Roberto's taco shop so much and spend more time in different Starbucks. So I need to go to Starbucks and find out, you know, like what people think about chicken cacciatoris and cafe au laits and all that stuff. You know, like what are the youthful cognoscenti really thinking about things? Because my son, I talk to my son quite a bit, and he's fairly normal. He's kind of he says he's a social shaper. He's an Apple developer, but you know, it's kind of like so that just really expresses like the kind of politics that people will go in for, and things like that. You know, like you have to be pro-trans. You have to be, from him, you know, you have to be pro-trans. Of course, from one of my daughters, you have to be anti-Trump. You know, and from him, you know, also you have to be, you probably are anti-China, which is interesting because since Trump seems to be the most anti-China. But yeah, so it's this kind of like the society has all these memes. And you can't control them. They're basically part of the ontic reality, and you just deal with it. And you have to understand those things in order to join the conversation. You don't have to take their side. I don't have to be a defender of all trans people as long as I'm very sensitive. You know, like I spent most of my life defending trans people from the standpoint that they would tend to have to live lives many of them would have to be prostitutes because that was like the default. If they were going to be full trans, they would have to, their default existence would be as prostitutes. And as trans people, they were disrespected and they were assaulted. There was a lot of assault and bad situations that they had to live through. So I was very interested in defending trans people most of my life. And then you get in a situation where like, well, all of a sudden everybody's trans. It's not just in other words, you had guys that are obviously motivated by the existential joy of living again amongst women with testosterone-based motivational structure, shall we say? So you get people who are obviously motivated illegitimately. That because I'm a trans man, I can win more arguments than a woman of my intelligence because she will not be as forceful. Because I'm a trans man, you know, and so on. All the advantages of being trans as opposed to what used to exist, which was the oppression, pure oppression of all trans people. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the way I used to look at it. You know, it's
I'm more interested in probably a far more important, more real category, and it's one that Heidegger brings up, and that's Germanness. It's a real phenomenon. I never thought of it, but you know, you look through. People begin to notice, for example, a movie like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah. In that case, the Italian director was blown away by Berman's Seventh Seal, and he suddenly realised there's a whole perspective of the world that comes from these this Nordic bunch, and it's so different from the Italian perspective. And he puts that all together to create the spaghetti Western, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Jack London gets into it as well with his book Seawolf, where he's exploring the Teutonic persona again, you know, and he's exploring Nietzsche's ideas. So Kenneth Clark, when he was doing his documentary on civilization, points this out, that you look back at around the time of the 15th century and you look at those paintings of these Germans, compare it of this painting of an Italian. There's an Italian, he's just complacent, he's just sitting with the world. And you look at these German guys, they're all crazy. Their minds are churned up. They're wondering what is the world about, you know. It's
well, that's a characteristic. I would say that's more a characteristic of German people. In other words, German, they're not all that smart, but I mean, the Germans are, some of them are Hanses. That's terrible, but the Germans are extremely respectful of culture. They have a lot of cultural history in country. So, and Heidegger, the only point in the book, I think, where Heidegger becomes concerned is when he's talking about Hölderlin and German poets and, to a certain extent, German philosophers and German historians. So he talks about specific German intellectuals, but I don't see him actually making statements about German good culture. I'm really there.
Yeah, I've been exploring the issue, and there's definite qualities there. There's something definite there, which is probably unique in the modern world. Well, take Martin Luther, the man was an ogre, obviously. But at the same time, he was one of the tremendous transformers of the modern world. I mean, he was laying the bait. This little fruit cake, you know, he was laying the foundations of the modern world, like, you know, some early Greek philosopher. We don't think of him as a philosopher, but essentially he was.
I think it was, maybe, I'm not sure if it was the video that guy posted, but I saw something today, a book or video or something, where the guy was saying that being in time is a copy of Martin Luther's project, so that the inspiration for Heidegger's project came from Martin Luther. I forget the exact person who I heard that from in the last couple of days. It might have been the guy on the video. I had to go back to my YouTube history to find out his name. Yeah, that was definitely what somebody said that I'd never thought of before. That there was a relationship between Martin Luther and Heidegger, who doesn't seem to have a drip of religiosity about him. You know, the death is the final curtain. You know, it's the being unto death that makes this the final distinction.
Of course, with Martin Luther, he was there
temporality. Yeah.
He was there in a sense to stand up for the individual spirit. He believed in the primacy of the individual spirit. And for example,
we know. That's good. That's right. Yeah.
Well, you would have had to have had a giant pair to take on the Catholic Church at the time. Maybe it's just crazy, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, he wasn't just crazy. He was able. Was it Prince Charles? He was able to get one of the major monarchs of his time on his side. It was one of the Westphalian prince or something, Prince of Westphalia or something. So he created the 30 Years' War. I mean, you know, I think I'm not sure if he survived it, right?
Not the 30-year. They talk about the 80-year war, which was the reaction to the Protestants, but the 30 years was the last 30 years of the 80 Years' War.
So that didn't come after the doctrine
Oh yeah, it came after the doctrine. The 30 Years' War, they say, ran from 1618 to 1648.
So when he escaped, when Martin Luther escaped to where he was going, I forget, to be safe from the Catholic Church, that's when the Prince helped him out, and that's when the 30 Years' War was underway. It started there.
No. It started probably the 80 Years' War started. So Luther was 1515. It's about 100 years before the 30 Years' War started.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been a long time since I read that book. I did read most of a biography of Martin Luther, but it's so long ago that I could have got those details.
Got to remember, it took the time. Catholics didn't react too fast because at first the Protestants, well, they always were simply Catholics that were protesting about elements of the church. And suddenly one day they suddenly woke up, there's a real force here and it's dangerous. We better attack it.
Okay. Oh, well, my Aussie friend and Salman, did you have anything to say, Salman? I haven't heard much from you.
Hello?
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah. Actually, I joined it's early morning in my time, but
You're in early morning,
yeah, it was good. It gave me a spark that the relation between Martin Heidegger and Luther. I tried to search for that. I haven't heard for that before.
Did you find anything? Maybe it was
I
a
find
Wikipedia
something
article, I forget.
in Stanford University.
Stanford, yeah.
Yeah, I could send the link for that.
My question in all this is, I've realised we cannot overlook Martin Luther. So the question of liking the guy, he was an ogre, but you can't overlook him. He can't be ignored.
He had constipation, I heard. I saw a movie, he was constipated.
Yeah, in that also passage, there are influences to more than one philosopher, from Kant to Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Feuerbach, and in the Marxism. So I think it's a good article, the one I shared with you now. I haven't read it yet, I just scanned through it.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Stephen. And yeah, I'm on the same. Yeah, David, you're in the West Coast, aren't you?
Yeah, Southern California.
Yeah. So it's getting a little late here. For me, it's getting late because I woke up. I was a little just short of sleep today. But thanks, everybody.
All right, I'll put up the next class soon. I wanted to say that before everyone left, but everyone's gone now. But I'll put up the next class tomorrow. And
I was wondering, Mr. Smith, his philosophy, has there been anything on that recently? There was something earlier today, wasn't there? But it wasn't the, it was his stuff about the Greeks, wasn't it? The Greek thought.
Yeah, I kind of dropped the ball on that one. No, I still wouldn't mind picking that up.
Kenneth Smith, yes, that's the man.
Yeah, Millennia and Microcosm. Thursday nights.
Oh, okay.
I haven't forgotten.
Okay, so the guy who was posted on your site, David, was Jason Reza Georgiani, PhD, and he wrote a book called Prometheus and Atlas, World State of Emergency. And this is like a series of looks at Heidegger's theory of technology. It's about the singularity. These guys believe in the singularity, But he believes the singularity is a positive event. So the singularity is Promethean, in other words. It creates the possibility of a stronger humanity through a closer connectedness between being and technology. So it's a rejection of Heidegger's fear of technology, in other words. Yeah.
A rejection of the Terminator.
Yeah, can I put my screen up?
I gotta give
Wait.
you permission to do that. Let me see. I always forget how to do that.
Oh, okay. Maybe you go under my ... and
Yeah,
more,
but it's not
under
giving
more.
me any options. I'm
No?
looking.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm looking at, but I don't see any options.
Okay.
Yeah. Share screen. Oh, I have to close here. Multiple, advanced, all. Okay. Did that help?
Let's try it. Yeah, that helped.
Okay.
Here you go. Optimize screen sharing for video clip. Okay, I'll do that. Share.
So, anthropologically speaking, of course, technology precedes science.
Because I don't hear it.
And as we've discussed in a previous program on Heidegger, Heidegger believed that, even the most basic scientific enterprises like geometry require certain tools to elaborate their
That's the
concepts.
guy anyway. You see him?
Yeah. Jason Reza. Yeah.
Yeah. Jason Reza Giordani. And so he's quite an active author. Seems to be, he wrote The Blind Owl of Sadeh Hedayat, Iranian Leviathan. But he's a distinguished speaker. He's a very good speaker. He is Heideggerian. So it's interesting source for everybody.
There's a very important theme there, not to be overlooked, I'd say. You think one of the really classic legends of the modern world as we know it, the larger modern world in terms of history, is Faust. And Faust, I get the feeling what Magic was talking about, what Magic was a reference to was technology. That was a time when, the technology of the printing press was vastly changing the world in the time of the mythical Faust. So it's Faust is a story of unbridled power, which is the great temptation for modern man. Yeah, I see Oedipus as being the great legend of the Greco-Roman epoch. Oh, this is Rudolf Steiner anyway, one of the valuable points I think I got from Rudolf Steiner. He saw Faust as being the quintessential tale of modern man who's done his deal with the devil and now has the servant technology, which is on the level of magical power and being possessed by it, losing to it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit of mythology. He's into mythology a little bit, but he's also into ontological analysis, so which is kind of like interesting. And he is a brilliant man. He's pretty interesting. I like the video. Except that the interviewer kept breaking in with and this woo-woo idea, and it wasn't breaking in that often. He was very polite.
All right, but you get the rest. Jason Reza, is it?
Yeah.
Jason
Reza Giordani, obviously an Iranian dude. Yeah. Oh, it says that he suffered libel and persecution as a result of his generally misunderstood political views. That's interesting. He has a GoFundMe page. Well, that is really interesting. You know, the guy is a bit of a political refugee. I'm not sure from what country. Let's go to the GoFundMe. Oh, he was defamed in the New York Times. Okay. Yeah. Using an edited video.
Yeah, well, at the moment, the world's not interested in thinking much. At the moment, the world has become very interested in power.
Right. Well, it's Heidegger's definition of the they self. The they self, basically strutting its stuff, similar to Nazism in a way.
Well, even with Marx, I think, you know, when he makes that line, which they say is misunderstood, when he says, until now, philosophers have been interpreting the world. The point is to change it. The point is an act of power.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
I've always had this edge here that, you know, there's this sort of imperative, which is very strong when we're little kids, that if we see a fault in ourselves, we have to fix it. We have to improve on ourselves, wherever it comes from, I don't know. And I suddenly realised, no, I can look at myself and can see that I'm lacking, but I don't have to do anything about it. I can just be aware of it. And too many people in the modern world don't have that. They figure as soon a description is automatically a prescription without stopping in the middle and saying, do I really want to do this?
Yeah, yeah. Everybody has their own projects. They don't have to be, you know, kind of like follow along in. They don't have to be swept up in anything that is necessarily crazy. Everyone needs to be permitted to have their own point of view about everything. Everybody has to make up their own minds about everything. Nothing needs to be assumed of other people. I was on a site though where a guy he accused me of putting him inside a box politically. And the reason he did that was because he said something about he said something specifically about the dictating, one American state dictating to the other. You know, we can't have New Hampshire dictating to California what to do, you know, or how to be, or anything like that. And I'm kind of like, and I replied to him, well, the dictatorship isn't, it was an argument about the Constitution, right? The voting, right? Democracy. And I said, well, that's not what democracy is. Democracy, you know, like my point and I know it was coming from the other side. He's like a libertarian, right? So I'm saying democracy is just a mechanism, which, you know, it's a very weak mechanism that's inside the Constitution for how we have the right to elect people federally, and that gets extended all the way down to local levels. So at whatever level you can do that, but you also can just communicate. You can be in the discourse. You can be in discourse with the media. You can be in discourse with your representatives and so on. So
I imagine democracy is something that only really works when you have a culture which feels it's still on the same page.
That's the problem right now. Yeah.
Yes, two very different pages now, and they're not going to listen to each other.
Yeah, but I think some of those things are just stupidities. The idea that democracy is dictatorship, and that the framers of the Constitution foresaw the dictatorship, and they took action, and that we have to continue to take actions to make sure that the rabble does not dictate.
Okay, now this is a story of the two wolves and the sheep voting what's for dinner.
Yeah.
And this is the absolutes of the majority, the absolute power of the majority.
That's what the discussion
it does seem to be a real issue, you know, as historically it was about, you know, about
sure.
creating protections for the minority, for the individual.
Right, but you have a mechanism for the individuals having power, and then people talk about limiting or even shutting down, if necessary, those mechanisms that were mechanisms of power for the individuals in society, and saying that these now have to be carefully modified and controlled and groomed, in other words, so that the wrong people don't get the idea that, you know, they can control things that it would be inappropriate for them to control. So it's kind of like fear run rampant, in my opinion. The idea that the little teeny bit of democracy we have in the United States would actually be misused if maybe a few thousand people more were allowed to vote, you know. You're looking skeptical, David. What were you going to say?
What, me?
Yeah.
I don't have any look at all.
No, I thought you had your skeptical face on. Okay.
David's got an angle which is a bit hard to penetrate, I think. It's a bit... No, he just seems to be watching quite a lot. He's not really coming out with terribly much. So it's probably the product of a long time experience in his particular activity. So David, what's the secret there?
The secret to what?
I don't know, to make you enthusiastic. Do I say Donald Duck or Elric of Melnibone? You know, did you ever become a Michael Moorcock fan? You know, we could start the religion now, the Temple of Chaos. I think it might be the right moment. So, you know, who was it? Arioch. He was the god of chaos in the Elric of Melnibone stories. You know,
isn't it Melnibone?
Oh, is that how it's pronounced? Melnibone, right?
I don't know.
I'll leave that to you guys, but thanks a lot, David. And see you soon.
As I said, I'll put the next class up tomorrow as soon as I can.
Okay, yeah, time to go. Back to reality, back to the grindstone of reality. See it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really late here. 10:30. Yeah. No, the more tired I get, the less talkative I get, and I'm not talkative to begin with. No, I'll talk a lot if I actually know what I'm talking about. If I know I'm not really sure about the Heidegger, and I'll leave it to James. He has the expertise here. But yeah.
I'll catch you next time.
All right, Stephen. Yeah, always good to hear you.